Yes, guys.
Yes.
Okay, everyone, hello and welcome to Monero's 5th Moneroversary, as we're calling it, the 5th anniversary of Monero's launch. We're really happy to have you on. There's a large number of people here on to help us. We'll have a large number of people on here to answer questions and to participate in learning about Monero's history and sort of what cool developments are going on. We have a good talk with Ricardo Fluffypony and Diego rehrar to speak a little bit later. And then to start us off, though, we want to kick in with the Vienna Meetup group. So we have Binary Fate in one of the Binary Fate with us, who is a Monero core team member. And then we also have the just an image of people that are at the meetup. So can you please, at this meetup, say hi to us, introduce yourselves, and show off all the cool stuff you have there?
Hey, hello. Hello from Vienna. We had a full day of a lot of Monero cakes. And we had a lot of different things going on in Vienna. So we had the traditional Monero cake cutting. And we had a lot of different talks with a short introduction about different elements we have been doing here. We had a lot of a full day actually of people like coming by and talking about Monero-related issues. Basically, we are here in the Riat Institute in Vienna, and it's a place where we are fostering privacy and cryptography, and we're trying to also make this available to a large amount of people. And there's also a quite semi-large Monero meetup here. So we had a lot of different people coming by, like learning about Monero, learning about the history of cryptocurrency, but also because privacy is a large topic and a huge topic in Europe these days, it was important to stress the fact that private cryptocurrency and privacy in cryptocurrency is something that still is somehow a niche, and we are trying to change that. And I think Monero is on the right way to do that. And the Monero meetup is existing since 2 years now. In Vienna, and yeah, we are happy to bring together a few people that are interested in pushing these kind of agendas. We also had the CCC kind of the Chaos Communication Congress thing going on in the past years, and we will actually do this also next year, actually this year again. So this was also good for us to gather people and to plan for the upcoming 36C3 meeting in Leipzig, which will be in December. So for us, it was a great day and a long day, actually, of a lot of different Monero-related events. And you've seen maybe the cake cutting in the morning. We made this kind of small scenery where we were also throwing a lot of confetti around and like celebrating a little bit. And throughout the day, a lot of more people were coming. So we had different fun things going on and a lot of cake, and we still have one of the cakes we can actually cut with you guys here. Yay! And we will eat this, and I hope everyone has the home Monero cake ready.
We know that Jitsi supports transferring objects over live stream, so we can receive our virtual cake over here. Is that the whole point of Tari, Ricardo, is for us to be able to transfer cakes over the internet?
I know, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but that's one of the first things we're working on is replicator technology.
I knew it.
I mean, it's what a blockchain is designed for, really.
All right, I saw that you had quite a few people that attended today for your workshops at Riat. You were tweeting quite a few pictures and materials from the events. What were some of the workshops about that you had there?
Marcus, can you explain a little bit, because you were tweeting the whole day?
Yeah, I was tweeting the whole day. Hey, everybody. I'm just getting next to Matthias. So yeah, what was happening? Like, we started early in the day, like, and obviously it was like, as always, like people get together. We were like discussing the whole day what was about to happen, and we started off with some getting to know each other, and then continued on like in specific various topics on like privacy by default, as I always was tweeting about this. So it's like very important that we all stay close to the privacy topic, as we all say, like in terms of fungibility, in terms of how the future of Monero, like in privacy point related issues, is being advanced. And we pretty much invited everyone to come over and you know, participate in this whole debate and you know, kind of like carry the spirit into in our everyday lives. So we had this kind of like quote adoption machine. So everyone was invited to get to know Monero, like having his first wallet kind of like in his hands, asking all kinds of questions. Then we actually had this drawing robot of ours, which was a fun thing to do. Maybe some of you noticed it. Like it's like a two-dimensional drawing robot from kind of like remembering from the ancient days, like working on a 2D scale, drawing Monero logos and all that stuff. So it was really fun. It was cool, like people enjoying it and hanging around. And then later that day, like there was like some more advanced lectures on like, I don't know, like all kinds of like how Monero evolved, what the community was about, like some more privacy enhanced figures, Green City stuff, like what.
Yeah, so for our context, it was important to actually also recap what was happening in the past meetup. So since we had a lot of like different topics in the past meetups happening, we were a little bit recapping, okay, how were we growing? We are approximately 300 members right now. Not all of the 300 people, of course, came, but we had a lot of different topics we have been covering over the past years. So also, Justin, you have been there at the first initial meetup, I remember. So we were, of course, also recapping this a little bit, also showing a little bit how Monero was changing over the past years. How there's still the Monero difference, but also like technically a lot of things have changed. So we had, of course, bulletproofs, which were a big improvement. We have been discussing also with binary a little bit how ASIC resistance as a topic is a very strong. It sounds very strong, and still we want to keep this kind of security properties with Monero in order to have a truly decentralized currency. But what are the limits of that? So is really possible to achieve this kind of ASIC resistance in the long run? Is what would be alternatives if that wouldn't be achievable in a way? Would that actually mean that we lose this kind of properties of a truly decentralized and private currency? So these were all like things we were like briefly discussing with different audiences. So it was actually spread over the whole day, and a lot of fun, a lot of cake, a lot of confetti. So we had a great time, and we still have a great time.
Yeah, it was great to hear with you. Thank you so much for having the initial countdown live stream for everyone to see early this morning, at least here in the US. I know it was still in the morning for you. It was perhaps 6 a.m. my time, and it was even earlier for people further out west. So it was an early one, but I'm glad that you were able to have it up for people to have as a nice reference. Is there anything that you want to leave us with before we jump into the history of Monero to get people started up for today?
No, go on. We are really happy to hear the history. This is important.
Excellent. So thank you again for having such a good in-person meetup there in Vienna. It's really important for us to have these in-person groups. And I know that we've worked together in the past to make some really good resources that your organization shares during the CCC. And I know that we can take advantage of it at other meetups and other events. So we really appreciate you doing that for the community. So thank you, Parsev. Thank you, Binary Fates. Thank you, Nevton, and everyone else who is there in person. We really appreciate everything that you do. So, I was happy to help speak with your group. I was thrilled, of course, that you set it up for the sake of me starting to speak there. And we wish you the best of luck. Many years of cake going forward. All right. Thank you for checking in with us. At this point, I'm going to move on to the second topic of the agenda, which is to move to have an interview of sorts with Ricardo Fluffypony Spagni. He is obviously the lead developer of Monero, right? Right, Ricardo? I'm pretty sure. Obviously, that's still the main title you go by.
Lead maintainer. Lead maintainer is probably closer to reality than developer.
I know that's something that you typically correct people on in all the podcasts. They're like, this is the founder and lead developer. He's single-handedly putting new blocks on the Monero chain.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's like EOS, but with one person.
Yeah, it's decentralized, though, of course.
Totally.
All right. So, Ricardo, can you kick us off with sort of the very early history of Monero? How and why did it start? What drew you and others to the project in the first place?
So I think, as in preparation for this, I went and looked back at old IRC logs. I have IRC logs from 2013 and 2014. So it's super convenient because I can actually go back and read the stuff. And it's been, just the past couple of days, just digging into those logs. And it's very dense. So I certainly didn't read everything, but there were some highlights and some choice things I picked out. So I figured what would be really interesting is to give people a little bit of background and then sort of tell my personal story. Obviously, there are people at the beginning that have other personal stories that I'm sure they will share over time as well. But so just, sort of a little bit of background is CryptoNote was the white paper that Monero was originally based on. And CryptoNote started off as good in theory, but it shipped with this really badly done scam coin. Bad done not from a coding perspective, although that was another story, but badly done because the whole scam was, hey guys, we've just discovered accidentally, by chance, this cryptocurrency that no one has heard of, but that has been in existence for several years. And it's been in existence on the dark web, and that's why you haven't heard of it, because nobody's gone on the dark web and discovered it. Which, of course, everyone that read that was like, but we've gone on the dark web and we've never heard of it. So the scam kind of started falling apart from the beginning because you can't pull the wool over everyone's eyes. Just ask Craig Wright. And it sort of started to get a little bit messy. But part of the scam was, we sort of discovered this over time, was that they were going to release a bunch of forks. And then the forks were going to sort of just provide additional income because they would be able to they would have all this knowledge and they'd be able to mine it much faster than everyone else. Or at least they'd start mining it much faster than everyone else. At any rate, what they didn't count on is human ingenuity and the ability for people to make good of a bad situation. So in many ways, Monero started off on this really rocky foundation. So there's this guy called Thankful for Today, total sock puppet for the CryptoNote Bitcoin scammers. And Thankful for Today goes and launches the first fork of this CryptoNote reference implementation. And he calls it BitMonero, which in Esperanto literally means Bitcoin, because Monero means coin. So, not a fantastic name, but that aside, everything else, is fairly good from a launch perspective. He announces it on Bitcoin Talk a couple of days before the launch. He tries to make binaries available and, make sure that he's around to provide a little bit of support. So, not bad from a launch perspective, apart from the general scamminess. And very quickly, I went and actually checked my logs, and this is now, let me actually open my logs so I can make sure I'm accurate. By the time April the 27th rolls around, we're already in our own chat room on Freenode, so we've already moved from BitMonero to Monero. And this is, April 27th is what? That's less than 10 days after launch. And we're already having a big disagreement with him. So, really within 2 weeks, he'd already lost control. The community had effectively been a coup, and he was ousted. Not ousted in sort of like a, you don't belong here sort of way, but more in a, well, we're doing this thing, you can go do your thing, and let's see who follows us. And of course, the community, in its infinite wisdom, decided to follow a bunch of randoms who had no idea what they were doing instead of the guy that launched it, which is, of course, interesting because, you would expect them to have gone the other route. But just some choice things. So my personal journey began when the CryptoNote thing was uncovered, and the whole like dark web secret launch, or the not so secret whatever thing was revealed. And these are the logs from RC, and I get this like message on RC from a guy I know quite well, and he says, "Morning, did you take a look at CryptoNote?" So I'm like, "No." So he links me to it. And he says, "Well, it's based on ring signatures for transactions, making it anonymous. Could either totally fail or be the next big thing." So I went and read up a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, this thing's kind of interesting." And looked at the code, and it was clear that it wasn't based on Bitcoin. And I said something that, like really stuck with me. I said to him, "Oh yeah, the problem will be that it's not Bitcoin or based on Bitcoin, so everything has to be re-engineered." And little did I know that what that actually meant, for me, was that I would be the one like getting stuck in and trying to help people re-engineer stuff. I thought like, oh, this is interesting. Other people go and re-engineer. And I never expected that I would have to go and herd cats and do a bunch of stuff myself. Other choice bits that are interesting from Monero's really early history. So this is 27th of April. Days after launch, we have this bot in the channel called Bot Monero. Get it? Because Bit Monero. And you could query Bot Monero, and you could ask it things like, what's the current difficulty? What's the current block height? What's the estimated hash rate? So 27th of April, and the hash rate's about 7,400 hashes per second. So, I mean, let that sit in your mind for a bit, because, Monero currently, I mean, the mining network, even before we had ASICs on the network, even before we forked, before we did any of that, was significantly larger than 7,400 hashes per second. Also, same day, 27th of April, this guy called Zone117X gets invited into the channel. He is the developer of NOMP, and there's this whole discussion about, hey, so there is no mining pool software for Monero or for CryptoNote in general. The only way you can mine it is solo mining with the CPU, not with the GPU. And there's this whole discussion of, hey, would it be possible to add support for Monero to NOMP? And this very serious discussion about how very difficult this would be, because none of the RPC calls are the same. Everything is different. Fast forward to the next day, the 28th of April, the hash rate has gone up to 9,300 hashes per second. The 28th of April as well was interesting because there was an OTC market that started on Bitcoin Talk. And by that stage, 28th of April, the first OTC trade was on the 22nd of April. So, the OTC market had been running for a little bit. For those that are interested in price, the very first OTC trade recorded for Monero was 1,000 Monero that was sold for 0.5 Bitcoin. At the time, Bitcoin was at about $500. So that means they paid about $250 for 1,000 Monero, which is now worth $70,000 if they held on to it. For those interested rather, it was A's who bought the 1,000 Monero. And who did he buy it? I can't even remember who he bought it from. Oh, he bought it from Noodle Doodle. So, this is like super early on. And then 29th of April, we broke 10,000 hashes per second, which was really, monumental in our minds. And then last sort of interesting tidbit from Monero's really early history was the 30th of April. And again, this just really goes to show how little we knew and how we were still so inexperienced in many ways. Was 30th of April, Taco Time, Taco Time was really the guy that did the actual act of forking the Monero repository on GitHub. So Taco Time was logged into the Monero project account, or had set up the credentials for the Monero project account on his computer, and he's not familiar with Git at all. And he's trying to get Git working, and he's trying to like commit stuff and submit a pull request. And anyway, he ends up messing it up so badly that the Monero project GitHub account opens a pull request on the BitMonero repository, on the BitMonero project GitHub account. It's still there today. It's the second pull request that's open on the BitMonero project / BitMonero repo. It's still open. I mean, thankful for today, just abandoned and never merged it, but never closed it either. And it's pretty hilarious. It's like this weird piece of history where we were just like, where Taco Time was super confused about Git and ended up opening this pull request in the wrong place and totally the wrong way. And it lives there in perpetuity. I don't think anyone's ever going to log in and close it. So that's like, that's like super early history. That's April 2014, 5 years ago, when we knew nothing. We had no idea what we were doing. I thought at the time, I'd like read the white paper, didn't understand half of it. I understood some and then didn't understand other important bits. And somehow in my mind, I thought that ring signatures applied to outputs and not inputs, which is a story for another day. So, it was really early days. We were super confused. We didn't know what we were doing. We were picking up all these pieces that other people had dropped. And it was an interesting time. There was nothing really.
I know that you've described the sort of the acquisition of Monero as someone depositing a baby on your doorstep, and you take this responsibility because you assume no one else can do it better. But sort of at that moment, can you walk us through how you sort of went through the process of essentially triage? Okay, you have this cryptocurrency. How do you prioritize what really receives work? Like, how did you even figure out what needed work, and how did you determine what to put your efforts to, and how do you find people that can even work on that? Can you walk us through that very first initial exploration process?
Sure. So we were blessed with a couple of things. The first was we had Taco Time and Noodle Doodle, who were super willing to do work, and they were like extremely talented C++ developers. For all that Taco Time couldn't figure out how GitHub worked, or Git, like he was really good at C++. So we had this initial spurt of like very basic things that needed to be done. So as an example, there were no Mac binaries. In fact, it didn't compile on Mac at all. So one of the early things was like, just knuckling down, compiling on Mac. And then it's like, cool, now we've got Linux working, we've got Mac working. Okay, we're sort of getting there. It was working. It was compiling on Windows in C++ .NET. So, that was a whole thing as well, because like you've basically got this entirely separate build infrastructure for Windows, which is in this like fantastic IDE, and then everything else is command line, and it's like super trippy. One of the things that was really difficult for us as well is there were no code comments. And literally no code comments. It was actually as if someone had taken the code that a bunch of people had worked on, full of comments, and they'd gone, let's strip out all the comments before we make this available publicly. So that was really difficult because you had no idea why certain decisions were made, what the thinking was, what the reasoning was, why, like where to find things. Everything you wanted to know, you had to backtrack. You had to go and like dig in, this class is like references. Okay, now we got to go to that class. Like you had to, you just lived on the command line in grep trying to find things all the time.
Do you think that was essentially deliberate for the point of trying to prevent someone else from taking the code and maintaining it themselves? Do you think it was try to literally prevent exactly what you did?
I suspect so. I've thought about this. Why would anyone strip out code comments if not to infuriate anyone that's trying to work on it? It was almost to keep them as the center of truth, the center of knowledge. Like, anything you want to do, you can't really do it, but they can do it because they have access to the like original source that is full of code comments. And so that was, it felt a little a little cruel. And it also led to some people being publicly infuriated by the code. Most famously, Peter Todd, who took a look at the code, tried to dig in a bit, and then eventually just said, "I'm sorry, I can't," publicly. And it was, you sort of look at that and you're like, okay, like why would anyone do that? Well, obviously it's to retain control, and to really think about how much adversity the developers, the community, everyone had to overcome is phenomenal. I'm really just proud of all the effort that everyone put in. To get back to your original question though, how do you decide what to work on? So, there were several major problems that we identified early on. The first was the blockchain was in RAM. So that meant that the blockchain could only grow as big as the memory on your computer. And then periodically, every 8 hours, or however often it was, I think it was every 8 hours, it would save that blockchain from memory onto disk. And then when you quit, it would also save it onto disk. This was, of course, ridiculous and unworkable. Other things that were really interesting were that, there was no like mnemonic system like we have today with the seed words. You would create a wallet, it would use 2 random keys. And then if you ever got rid of that wallet file, keys are gone forever, no way to recover them. There was also no like plain text way of saving them. You literally had to save that file in some sort of non-volatile way and hope that you could recover it in future. Other issues that we had were no pool software, no way to mine Monero except solo mine, no GPU miner when the GPU miner was clearly possible. What else was painful? No GUI. Oh, that was the other one. Man, people complained about that a lot. So we sort of try to tackle a million things at the time. Because again, it's this nascent project. We don't really know what we're doing. So we're like, okay, we need a GUI. And so we start on that. And then at the same time, someone else is like, oh, we need pool software, and sort of start down that. And so you're trying to just like get to all these things at the same time. And then we tried really hard. And I think after like 6, 7, 8 months, really towards the end of 2014, that's when we really got hard with ourselves and we were like, okay, some of these things are just not going to happen. So we scrapped the GUI software for the moment. At that point in time, we had the designs ready. We had this basic framework that was compiling in Qt. It was almost ready to start hooking it up. We just didn't have the time, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the energy. Pool software was more important. GPU mining, well, somebody would work on that. Eventually Wolf worked on it, and stuff started getting released at some point. But it was really it was really difficult at the beginning. Everything was painful. Everything required like in-depth research. And I'll give you a classic example of this, and that is the blockchain in RAM. So the blockchain's in memory. We need to get the blockchain out of memory. It's not feasible for it to be in memory. And there's super big time constraints on this, because once the blockchain starts hitting like 4 gigs, then even if you have more than 4 gigs of RAM, you can't save it to disk on 32-bit systems. So, we've got a limited time frame for 32-bit systems. And obviously, I mean, especially in 2014, how many people had more than like 4 gigs of memory? That was not that common. And a lot of people who did have more only had 8 gigs of memory, so we would still have a problem like pretty soon thereafter. So, we're sort of trying to tackle that, and then we go, okay, so we need to have this blockchain in a database. What should that look like? Well, okay, what does Bitcoin do? It's the first question we always asked was like, what does Bitcoin do? Okay, Bitcoin did level DB or Berkeley DB, and then they switched to level DB. So should we do that? Is this a good choice for our workload? Because we weren't really very big on like not invented yet syndrome. Taco Time had contributed to Bitcoin and had a bunch of ideas of his own. And obviously like other people just came with sort of a more fresh approach, but everyone had a great deal of respect for what Bitcoin had accomplished. And so it was like, okay, what did Bitcoin do? Should we do it differently? And if we're going to do it differently, why? So one of those early discussions was around the database, and I went and did a bunch of research, and I found this thing called HamsterDB. which seemed really interesting because it had like the free open source version, and then it also had a closed source version, which was slightly faster, or I think significantly faster, which was great for like enterprise environments. So I thought this was kind of a nice mix, because you can have the open source one that everyone runs, and then if you are like an enterprise environment, or let's say an exchange or a mining pool or whatever, you can then go and use the faster commercial version and go pay for it. And in this research, I came across this one set of benchmarks, and it was like comparing all these like level DB forks and hamster DB and some other things, and then like it had this weird thing called LMDB, and in like some of the benchmarks, LMDB just blew everything out the water, and I was like, whoa, what is this thing? Like, why is no one talking about it? Everything that I read on embedded databases is like level DB forks, and then occasionally a couple of others. Oh, SQLite, it's the other one that gets thrown in all the time. And why is no one talking about LMDB? It's so weird. And then I went and like checked the LMDB, went and did an actual search for LMDB things, like comparisons that people had made, and where they'd given it actual workloads and they'd benchmarked it. And I found a couple of people who had written things where they were critical of LMDB, and then a couple of things where people had like lots of love for LMDB. And so I was like, this is really interesting. It's kind of like the underdog, and I have I guess I have an affinity to underdogs in a way. I guess that's why I started working on Monero in the first place. And so I was like, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll get a hold of the developer, and I'll just ask him, and I'll say to him like, hey, we want to use LMDB in a cryptocurrency. Like, what do you think of it for our workloads? So, I managed to figure out that he was on IRC, and I sent him a message, and of course it's Howard Chu, HYC. And so I sent Howard a message, and I was like, again, I've got these early logs where we're having this discussion, and he's like, yeah, cryptocurrency, you could see he's kind of mad at it. And he gave me a couple of pointers. And so then we started building. We were not confident in LMDB at all. And so we started building LMDB as the main one, but a level DB backup, so that we could just use RocksDB or something if LMDB didn't pan out. And so we had this blockchain DB generic class and then specific implementations. And we started building this, and then we'd get stuck with some stuff, and then I'd ping Howard and I'd be like, hey, we're a little bit struggling with this a little bit. What do you think? And he'd pop into Monero Dev on RC, and he'd help us a little bit, and then he'd disappear, and we'd carry on. And then I think just by pulling him in the whole time, eventually he got so interested and excited that he's become a major Monero contributor and a major part of Monero's ecosystem. And it all started from those early discussions of hey, we'd like to use the thing you built, and not asking him for help really in terms of implementation. We did that, but asking him for just pointers here and pointers there. And it just goes to show that people fall in love with Monero. They fall in love with this project where it has heart. And I think that is, you asked, how do you attract people to work on the project? And I think there's no other way to describe it. The thing that Monero has, which most projects do not have, except for Bitcoin and a handful of others, is heart. And you just, if you get to know it, especially from a development perspective, especially in the early days where there were no code comments, the test framework was kind of mature, but still didn't implement a bunch of things. There were no builds for a bunch of platforms. Everything was terrible. The code was awful in many ways, but you fell in love with it because it was like this piece of clay, and you had this lump of clay, and you were like, I can see what the pot looks like when I'm done. If I put it on one of those big rotatey things, and I have a bunch of water, and I pour the water on it, and I mold it, and then someone comes behind me and puts their arms around me whilst I'm doing that, I will end up with this lovely vase. And you could see that. You could see the potential, but that's all you could see because everything was a mess. And just falling in love with it at the beginning with this lumpy piece of clay, I could see that happen for other people and for other developers that pitched up that wanted to work on it and that have stuck around for years. not for personal gain, but just out of sheer interest in what Monero can be.
Awesome. So we're about halfway through, so I'm going to move on to a few other questions. But the first one I want to ask is, if you had to do this entire process all over again, I know it would be a rough process, but what do you wish you knew when you were going through this process that would have helped you out a lot?
That's a good question. I think I wish that I had, I mean, obviously I wish I had the knowledge now that I had then. I wish I had known what people wanted and needed out of the software early on. You know, we had to bash our head a lot in terms of figuring that out. And it's been equal parts rewarding and challenging and frustrating. But I really wish I knew what people really wanted, because it's such a hard thing to read. You know, people complained about the GUI, and they need the GUI, they want the GUI. And it took us a few years to get it out because we were so prioritized security and just getting things working. And when we did release it, then we had a lot of really positive feedback from people that were like, cool, the GUI. And then also just a bunch of like negative feedback from people who are like, this is not what I expected. You know, like I just wanted the thing that would start up and work magically and not run a full node. And it's, you know, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe if we knew now, or knew then what we know now, maybe what we would have done is just like put a gigantic pause in things and be like, look, these are the 10 things that we need to do before anyone can use Monero. And between now and then, like the only way you're going to use it is the command line, and that's it, tough. We're not going to have easy access tools. Our time frame on getting these tools out to you is like 5 years. Like, deal with it. And maybe that would have been a better approach instead of chasing our tail constantly. I also think that we've spent a lot of time getting a lot of hate and a lot of negativity from people for various reasons. Monero just is that project that some people love to hate, whether it is because they're in competition, whether it is because they're jealous, whether it is that they legitimately believe their thing is better. I don't know, and I don't really care. But we've dealt with a lot of hate, like more than usual. I mean, I'm used to hate on the internet. I'm used to people being like massive douchebags, and it's fine. It's water for ducks back. You don't like survive on the internet unless you can take a bit of abuse. But Monero has really had a lot of aggressive abuse hurled at it, a lot of unnecessary public abuse, and we've survived through all of that and prospered. But I wish that I had known then what I know now, because I probably would have been able to like bolster things and prep us at least mentally and emotionally for some of that. Because we were not prepared. We thought that everyone would love us and think that we're the darling of new tech because we're helping people. It's privacy. It's great.
Awesome. So can you explain a little bit, as Monero got larger, there was a requirement that you really understood what was going on with Monero's code and how to improve it. And of course, you also had other sort of work groups of sorts. You had other coalitions of people that came together to negotiate things about Monero's protocol and how Monero did things a little bit better. So can you walk us through the initial formation of the first few work groups, the Monero Economic Work Group and the Monero Research Lab? How did that sort of get off the ground? And what was the real importance in Monero's legacy there that these were started, even if, for example, the Monero Economic Work Group isn't really a thing anymore?
Sure. So I think, okay, so, you know, taking one at a time, the Monero Research Lab was formed because, like, again, you know, we felt as developers that we had some really amazing people. You know, we had Smooth, who is an absolute genius. And like I can come up with this like harebrained scheme and be like, what if we did this and we did that, and then this cool thing did that, and then Smooth will just take one look at it and be like, oh yeah, but that's trivially broken because someone can do this. Ding. And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see how that's trivially broken. So you have him, and we had like Taco Time, who also just came with this like incredible deep knowledge of cryptographic systems and how everything like fits together. But we lacked, I think, formal academia. And so one of the things that I did really early on was I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. We need some formal academia involved. In particular, we need to understand this white paper properly. And so I went onto Reddit, and I went onto, I think it was the For Hire subreddit, and I Googled for like mathematician. And I came across this guy, and he was offering maths classes and offering assistance with homework and stuff like that. But his credentials were pretty solid. So I sent him a message, and I was like, hey, so we can't pay much, but we can pay you a little bit of money to like annotate this white paper and that we have, because we don't really understand it that well. And he was like, okay, cool. And this was Brandon Saray. And he was like, okay, that's cool. I can do that. And this is how much I'll charge you. And, we came to an agreement there. And then like he sort of started, and he was like, well, I've got this friend who's more familiar with cryptography. And what if he helped me and we did it together? And I think we didn't even like change the rate. Like they gave us the same rate, both of them to do it. And it was such a small amount of money. It was ridiculous. But like they were academics at university, and like we needed the help and they needed that little bit of money. And so everything sort of came together. Anyway, his friend was Sarang. And so they both got involved. And like at the beginning, like we had this discussion about when you publish this, because they started working on it. We said, like, when you publish this, what name are you going to publish this under? And he was like, I don't know. Let me go and speak to my advisor and I'll come back to you. So he spoke to his advisor, and his advisor was like, oh, cryptocurrency can be a little bit dodgy. Maybe don't publish it under your own name. You can always go and like later on and be like, oh, yeah, I'm connecting my real name to my pseudonym. And so we decided we needed a pseudonym. So I said to him, okay, why don't you guys come up with a pseudonym scheme, and, then we can do that. So he was like, okay, cool. So he went away and came back, and he said, they've decided the pseudonym scheme they're going to use is their surname is going to be Notha, and their first name will start with an S. So they're going to be Saray Notha and Sarang Notha. Great. So that was really the start of the Monero Research Lab with the two of them. And shortly after they not that shortly, I'd say, within a few months of them starting and doing this great big annotation of white papers, we came across this other guy who pitched up and wanted to like help contribute on the research side. And we were like, well, you can contribute on the research side, but then you need to join the Monero Research Lab, which is like this open collaboration. And if you're going to do that, you need to have a first name that starts with S, and then your surname needs to be Notha for your pseudonym. And he was like, okay, I'll be Shen Notha. Great. So now we have 3 people. And that's sort of like how it snowballed. And it was just this like these people that would like speak a little bit to each other online and bounce ideas around. And then I went to Salt Lake City in Utah and flew Saray, Sarang, and Shen all into Salt Lake City. Well, I think Shen was nearby and whatever. Anyway, they all came, and we hung out in Salt Lake City for like a weekend and drove around. I was there visiting my business partner, and he had an Audi TT. And it was hilarious because like we crammed into this Audi TT, and at one point it was like, I think there were like 5 of us in an Audi TT. That car does not have a lot of space. I don't actually know how we managed to fit in there. And of course, being South African, like, I'm not like that familiar with mileage and like how much mileage you get when you're measuring miles and your gas is not measured in liters. And my business partner told me that the gas gauge was broken, but I like forgot. And so he was like, you probably have like 100 miles or whatever it was. And I totally forgot. And we ran out of gas on the highway. And thankfully it was like near a slipway coming off the highway. And we sort of just rolled to a halt on the side of the highway. And the Monero Research Lab and I had to walk to a petrol station and get like a little thing of gas and go back up and like pour it into the tank and then drive the car down to like fill it up properly. And that was that was the first Monero Research Lab meetup where we, again, like just had no idea what we were doing and no idea what we were getting into, but we were trying it out and it was fun. The Monero Economic Work Group was interesting. It was a couple of people in the community that were very interested in who was going to provide input to Monero's economy. And when I say economy, I think their primary goal was the design around the emission curve and what, if anything, changed with that. Also, like, could there be subsidies for participants in the community? And they had in the economy rather. They had really good intentions, but they had this idea like you had to pay to join the Monero Economic Work Group, and then there would be meetings and there would be votes and all sorts of stuff. And the biggest thing that they didn't realize, and this was a massive early lesson in governance, was that they have no control or influence over what the developers do. So some of the developers were members of the Monero Economic Work Group, but when the Monero Economic Work Group took a vote on something, they actually were powerless. It's not like they could force the developers to do anything. And so it was a really good early lesson on that. But what was really powerful was that the Monero Economic Work Group formed itself. There was no pushing, there was no one forced them to exist. And they were self-governing, they were self-assembling, and they just carried themselves. And they eventually disbanded for a bunch of reasons. I think probably because, charging to be part of a work group is not the most sustainable way. But it was still it was a fantastic early model that started to develop this idea of self-assembling work groups. Monero Research Lab had been self-assembling. Not initially. Initially, I got and found people, but then Shen pitched up, and then a couple of other people pitched up. And it, the Monero Economic Work Group was self-assembling. And so this formed the basis for what we have today, which is anyone can pitch up and form a work group. You want to do marketing? No problem, form a work group. And that's why we have the Monero Outreach Work Group. You're worried about attackers and hackers? No problem, form a work group. That's why we have the Monero, the VRP Work Group, which is the Vulnerability Response Process. You're worried about malware? No problem. Like, let's find a way to tackle it. That's why we have the Malware Response Work Group. So anything like that you can imagine, people can form work groups for. Even the developers now are broken up into work groups. You have developers that focus on the core code, and that's like the core development work group. You have developers focused on the website. That's like the website work group. You've got developers focused on the GUI. That's the GUI work group. You've got developers focused on translations, and they've got their own work group with their own tools that they use. So work groups have been incredibly powerful, especially for managing different groups of people that want to do different things on this open source software and this ecosystem at large.
Excellent. Thank you for the perspective on sort of Monero's community organization. On a similar note, you are a member of the Monero core team. We have another member of the Monero core team on here, Arctic Mind. We can speak to him in a few minutes. But can you quickly describe the role of the Monero core team and how this has evolved over time? What do you see the role of the core team being now, and how do you expect it to progress into the future?
Sure. So the core team's initial role, I think, was to shoot Manero. And so that meant a lot of things. It meant writing code. Taco Time wrote a bunch of code. Noodle Doodle wrote code. I wrote code. Everyone wrote code that could. And then there was this other role, which was like obvious stuff, like owning the domains. Who owns the domains? Who goes and owns the GitHub account? How do we like prevent that from getting compromised? And if we can't prevent it from getting compromised, if it does get compromised one day, like, you know, who takes responsibility for that? And there's got to be some central cabal of that. There's no way to really do that in a truly decentralized, community-led way just yet. You know, you can't have a domain that's owned by a community at this stage. So you know, those are the basic things that they do. And really, I think the initial role was stewardship. And stewardship at that early stage meant a lot of do-it-yourself and a lot of go out and find people and ask them. So like the Monero Research Lab, those early days where I went and found Saray and Sarang, well, found Saray and Saray asked Sarang. You know, those early days where it was like they wouldn't have discovered, I mean, they might have discovered Monero, but chances are they would only have discovered Monero much later. So them discovering Monero early on was because as a core team, we identified a need and went out and found it. That has changed significantly. I would say as a core team now, we maybe have, we have some, our voice carries some weight as individuals. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, there are people who've been around for a long time whose voice carries weight and they're not part of the core team, like Monero Moo, like Hike, you know, like a bunch of people. So it's not that that's the defining factor. I think literally the only thing that really the core team does nowadays is owns the GitHub repo and owns the domains, and then handles financial stuff, very limited financial stuff. So paying for like the build servers and paying for like the CDN and a couple of those things. You know, we like someone's got to pay for those, and we pay for those typically out of general donations. Or more recently, we've got either donate or that is sponsoring the server that the Monero website and a lot of the key resources are served off of, and then Tori is sponsoring the CDN. We haven't really started speaking about that. It's something that's just changed over the past couple of months. So we haven't needed to tap into the general donation fund for that. But beyond that, there's nothing. You know, we don't make decisions. We don't really decide anything. As individuals, we can participate in things. So apart from my role in the core team, I'm also the lead maintainer, which is a separate thing. And so as the lead maintainer, I make suggestions about when we branch, when we tag releases, and all I make are suggestions. You know, if I say I think it's a good idea to tag on Tuesday, and everyone says, no, it's a bad idea, we should tag on Monday, I'm going to tag on Monday. I'm not going to do what I want to do. So there's, you know, the roles are, we're almost put in place, or we have authority that's relative, and it's relative because we're given that authority by the community. When we're not self-authorizing, we're not, you know, we can't go and just do our own thing. And really, given Monero's history and what happened early on, we're in a position where if we take one false move and we aggravate the community too much, they will just fork away from us. They'll fork away from the core team and go set up different domains and different GitHub repos. They'll fork away from the developers if they don't like what the developers are doing. So our power and authority is relative, and we're very cautious and careful not to overreach. We have no control, and that's the way we like it. It's not centralized in any way, which is the way we prefer it.
All right, thank you so much, Ricardo Fluffy Pony. I'm glad that we were able to just sort of touch the surface here on some of Monero's early history. We really didn't get into anything really outside of 2014, apart from a few things looking forward with the core team. So I'm glad you're able to set the perspective on Monero's early history. Thank you so much for joining us and having that discussion with us. And so now we are going to immediately transition into our next event, which is the Monero Coffee Chat, essentially. This is our special edition for Monero's anniversary, the Moneroversary. And so I'm going to do some quick introductions here with people who are available. Let's start with the other Monero core team member who's with us. Let's start with Arctic Mind. Arctic Mind, can you introduce yourself for us, please? You may have to unmute yourself.
Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you. And I'm advised that we have Binary Fate on too, so we'll get to him right after you, Arctic Mind.
Okay, sounds excellent. Any issues with audio, connectivity, etc.?
Nope, it's a lot better than last time.
Yeah, everything sounds great.
Go ahead.
Good. Okay, excellent. Well, like I said, was involved with the core team since 2016. So I was one of the initial members of the core team. I got involved with Monero in 2014, essentially as an investor, and then spent a lot of time doing research on certain aspects of the project. My background is physics and mathematics. I did my degree in physics, it's a PhD, and mathematics, and I've also done a lot of investing. I work a lot in the nonprofit area. And so my main interest in the project, which is interesting, is something that a lot of people really don't associate with Monero, which is scaling and on-chain scaling. So that's in the project outside of being involved in the core team, which is totally separate. I mean, working on block size scaling algorithms and how you're supposed to price these things and so on. It's really totally independent. It's analogous to what Ricardo was mentioning before. Another comment I'd make, I've been in the core team, I will summarize the core team at this point, is that it serves at the pleasure of the community, which is kind of sort of touching on what Ricardo had said. So there is, we sort of basically have to get a sense of what the community wants, and where it's heading, and what's expected, and that's a very important element of it. So that's kind of where I am. My background, I've been involved for, like I said, primarily as an investor, and then I did a lot of research, and then the results of that research actually applying back into the community.
All right, thank you, Arctic Mind. So
you're very welcome.
On to the third Monero core team member. How about we have Binary Fate introduce himself to everyone here? All right, Binary Fate, are you available? Looks like he was on the back. He's running. You can see him in one of the other panels running to the screen. Okay, go ahead, Binary Fate. Okay, well, we can come back to him. I can see him at the computer, so feel free to interrupt us at any point to do some quick introductions. Instead, let's move on to the totally magnificent rehrar. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm rehrar. My name is Diego Salazar. I do things in the Monero community. Oh wait, no, there's Jeremy, and he's cooler than I am. So I will.
No, you should finish, and we can move on to Jeremy.
Oh, okay. So I do some web work stuff. I do some. I try my best to keep spirits high in Monero and to make jokes that aren't funny, so people can pretend to laugh at them. And really anything I can sink my hands into in terms of community work. I'm a UI UX person, and I try to do a lot of behind the scenes UI UX work because open source sucks with UI UX. Cryptocurrencies suck in general with UI UX, and Monero really sucks with UI UX, and that's just the way that it is. I'm trying my best to make that a different story, but this is the story that we have right now. And it's not Monero's fault. There's just a bunch of nerds working on it that don't know anything about design, but that's okay. That is okay. We love them for who they are, right? So I just, anything I can stick my hands into. Sometimes a core team gives me something to do, and they'll say, "Hey, Diego, can you do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get that done." Because they don't, as they mentioned, they don't really do anything. So so I do the stuff. But that's me. That's what I do. And I go on long rants, and you'll hear a rant from me later on. Justin actually scheduled a specific time for me to give a rant today. And it'll be like 45 minutes long, and you all are in for a treat, let me tell you. But for now, I'm going to give the floor and the microphone away before I talk too much and get into one of my ants preemptively. So bye-bye.
Yes, thank you, Diego. We specifically scheduled time for Diego to have a rant, so that way we can keep it outside of the coffee chat time and we can still talk to others. Okay, let's give it another try. Binary Fate, can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. We can't see you, but we can hear you. And that's what's important.
I disagree. Binary Fate is a beautiful man, and I would love to see him.
It's possible.
Yeah, we're trying to fix that.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
Oh. Hey, you're beautiful too. Yeah. So Justin, what do you want me to talk about?
At first, let us know who you are.
Yeah. So Binary Fate, member of the Monero core team. I'm involved in Monero, both with the actual project and then with the ecosystem from very early on, because I was doing stuff in cryptocurrencies out of personal interest from a technical or ethical perspective, even before Monero. And then when Monero came up, very quickly, it was just like a match in heaven for me. But I was also very interested to build businesses and make a living in that domain. And this is what I've been trying to do with Monero as well. And I believe in a dynamic where businesses can actually build on top of open source projects and then in return actually fund or donate back to the open source projects, so that there is a way for projects that at first are disinterested or don't have any financial interest like Monero, to actually get sufficient funds to pay people that needs actually funding to work on the project full time, or where they can do it like that. So I was blessed to create businesses that could give back to Monero to fund various foreign funding system, and now community crowdfunding system. I came up with that name, but I still struggle to to say it. I'm sorry, Diego. I know you didn't like the name. That's my fault. Anyway, we'll have to stick with that for probably a decade now. Anyway, so that's what I was doing like in my professional life, which is to develop business on top of a layer in which I believe, and try to give back to that layer, which is Monero, and then on the personal side, try to contribute what I can as a member of the community first, and then as a member of the core team.
I'm sure you're going to introduce the brand new website you announced earlier today. So would you like to mention that again here?
Yeah. So I had a very short night yesterday, and actually a bunch of short nights in the last days, because we were trying hard to push to actually release today, which was tough, but we made it. So it's called minco.io. It's a gambling website. So it's a game that is probably fair, and it's actually really fun because you can, even if you're not into gambling, you can really see that the actual network and the software is working so well. So you can just go to a Meetup and use that to demonstrate that when you send a transaction, you actually see the result in just like seconds. So I think it's great also to introduce newcomers. But the idea, in general, of course, it's a business. It's not related to the actual core team. But for the first month, we will donate the entire profit to the Monero General Fund that the core team then administer. And we will most likely continue, giving donations long term after that. We have to find a good model. We have to also to see what traffic and volume we get to take that decision. But for now, basically, it's a cool game. You can go to minco.io, and either you get money, you earn money if you win, or if you lose, you are effectively making a donation to Monero.
Yeah, that's good.
I think we all should have brought our audience applause background riffs. Anyway, thank you so much, Binary Fate, for introducing yourself. All right, Sarang, can you introduce yourself to everyone here, please?
All right, can you hear me okay?
We can't hear you.
Hey, I've had perpetual problems with Jitsi, but it's apparently working today. So my name is Sarang Noether, and I am one of the 2 full-time researchers with Monero Research Lab. I actually started with Monero back like in the pre-Ring CT days in grad school, just kind of doing part-time work for Ricardo, fluffypony, on doing some kind of just initial review work, and then kind of slowly like let that kind of slide to the back burner. And then after grad school, joined up again full-time with Monero Research Lab. And now that's what I do, completely supported by the community. I, along with my counterpart, Brandon, who's Sarang Noether, we do protocol analysis and design and feasibility testing. We do security reviews. We write papers, have meetings, all sorts of things. So I guess I kind of like to say that we do math so that you don't have to. And part of our goal is to try to make Monero, as it currently is, as safe and as private as possible. And another goal that we have is to kind of figure out what's going to be next for Monero and figure out how to take things that are done in the cryptographic space kind of more academically and see what's feasible to bring into Monero kind of from a practical perspective. So we do a lot. And I personally am super thankful for the amazing community that we have. I mean, nothing that we do could be done without the support of the amazing Monero community.
Okay, thanks again, Sarang, for having you on. It's always a privilege to work with you on things like the Breaking Monero series. I want to point out that Sarang Noether Brandon unfortunately couldn't make it with us because he's currently at Clemson speaking about how he made Monero more secure. So he's doing his actual job right now rather than just sitting in front of a camera, unfortunately. So I'm sure we'll be able to speak with him some other time. We're trying to get together and have more Breaking Monero episodes in the future. All right, Need Money 90. Your turn.
Hey, I'm Need Money 90. I'm a moderator in the community, among other things. If you've been banned or censored, I'm probably the person that you want to be looking at. So at the end of this coffee chat, I'm not sure exactly how long after. It might be half an hour or somebody says I'm quiet. It might be half an hour or an hour after the coffee chat. I'm not sure. I'm going to be releasing a puzzle for the Moneroversary. It has multiple layers, and the winners will be entered for an interesting prize, but that will not be announced until 24 hours after the puzzle is released. So we'll see how that works out. Hopefully people enjoy.
All right, thank you so much, Need Money 90. Next, Paul, can you introduce yourself for everyone here, please?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you and see you, so perfect.
Okay, cool. It's not, there isn't too much background pop music going on or anything?
Only small traces. We can definitely still hear you.
Excellent. It's terrible, so I'm glad. My name's Paul. I'm the CEO at Monero. We make very usable Monero wallet software for Monero, which luckily all of you are familiar with, so I don't have to go into the details of what it actually is. I, just by way of brief introduction, got into Monero through Bitcoin, actually. Found out about Bitcoin, found out that it seemed a little bit stagnant. There was some interesting research going on around it, but it didn't seem like too much was able to be implemented in Bitcoin itself for some reason. So, yeah, lovely. I'm outside, as you guys can infer.
Yeah, we know that there's an apparent fire that's happening right in your building.
Yeah, it's right here. So yeah, I found out about Monero. It looked to be very, very cool, and I noticed that there was no mobile application for it, and there apparently were some usability issues for just ordinary people with it. So I started asking around what people would want to see in a mobile application, and then fluffypony probably just got wind of my inquiries, and he said that if I want to work on a Monero wallet, that I could start working on my Monero, and the rest is history. So, let me take this chance to say happy birthday to Monero.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad that this is a good time for you. We always mean to have you in all the coffee chats, and
yeah, totally.
we're just
it's
really
crazy.
happy to have you.
Yeah, life gets crazy sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And then there's one other person that is joining us. I believe it's HYC. HYC, if it is you, can you speak up? Or if you're the other mysterious person of the channel, let us know who you are.
Hey, yeah, this is HYC.
Perfect. I guessed correctly.
Yeah, so hello. I'm kind of a networks and database guy, but here I am.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I was wondering, does HYC also have pop music in the background, or is that still Paul?
That's got to be.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no music playing here.
Yeah, HYC likes to mix in pop music with his violin music. It's just, they go together so well. I'm sure you have very strong opinions there. So if anyone has, questions on some music opinions, that's of course a question you should ask in the chat. I'm keeping a strong eye on it, so make sure to ask other questions. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me ask questions the whole time, which will be boring. But I'm going to.
I have a question, actually.
Oh, you have a question, Endogenic. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's a quick question. And yes, my handle is Endogenic for anyone who knows me by that handle. So how many people say HYC, how many people say hike, and how many people say high C? Personally, I say high C. I think it's cool.
I mean, HYC is like the only way to say this name. It's cool. It flows well, in my opinion. And like, if you've ever seen him, you're like, that man is HYC right there.
I always said hick like a hiccup. It sounded fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you meant like in hiccup there when you called someone hick. I'm sure that's exactly what it was.
That's exactly what I meant.
HYC.
There you are. Well, that's what I've always said, because it's just, it's just 3 initials. It's not a word.
I don't have time for that. It's hick.
Yeah, again, thank you everyone for joining us. So one question I want to start us off with, there's a lot of people that are joining us. They might be watching this and might not otherwise be very engaged in the community. They may have some interest in Monero, but aren't the people that are typically going to every meeting and every sort of event that Monero is hosting, because we try to get this event out there. So I guess I can start with Diego, and then we can expand to others who want to address this topic. What are some ways that we can get sort of newcomers to get interested in helping? I know that Ricardo mentioned sort of the magic that was involved with Monero that got many of its original contributors interested in helping. How do we really keep this going as the community gets larger?
This is something that I've definitely given a lot of thought to, and I've been primarily responsible for the rollout of many of the Workgroup what are they called? Resources, such as the Mattermost, which connects to the IRC. It has a bridge to the IRC, and it's the open source self-hosted version of Slack. So we do have a Slack as well, but after a certain amount of messages, they cut you off unless you pay per user. And so Mattermost is like, yeah, we have all of that, except we're not Slack, and you can have access to all those things in perpetuity. And also things like Taiga, which is kind of an agile development tool where people, Moneruyo has used it, the DEF CON people have used it to go ahead and have an easier time kind of organizing their people and processing and tracking their development. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do to get people to volunteer is to reduce the barrier to entry as much as possible, just so it's easy for people to either get connected to a work group that already exists or have the resources necessary to kind of launch their own work group. And a lot of people can get stuck. They're like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know how I would organize people, or I don't know how. And so that's the, kind of where Mattermost and Taiga and these other things come in. Where it's like, okay, these things exist. If you want to do this, here's a platform for you to do it. And it's already up. It's already set up for you to do this type of thing. And I can help you through it. So really lowering the barrier to entry of volunteering, because something like Monero, too often people are like, well, I don't code, or I code in the wrong language, so I don't know how to contribute. And people like Johnny have done a great job of trying to lower the barrier of entry for translators, for the core software and the GUI software, and maybe somewhere along the line for the website as well. And it can be tough because a lot of this requires outside the box thinking. A lot of this requires, okay, I don't code. How can I help the Monero project? And it depends on how much free time you have, how much passion you have. Sometimes if you're going to put a lot of time and effort towards this, you might want to get compensated for this, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And we have a system for that, the community crowdfunding system. But, that has its own strengths and weaknesses. And a small barrier to entry in terms of reputation and trust of the individual in question that's putting up the proposal. So I think, in my opinion, the way that we just continually get volunteers to come and get volunteers to stay is keeping the barrier of entry low and trying to keep morale high. I think people vastly underestimate the human component of open source projects. We forget that behind every computer screen is a human being. And people like to be appreciated. People like to be included. People like to have, fun with each other. And if all we do is just come together and we just work on things and we go home and go to bed, well, this might be a little bit more boring of a place to be. So making sure that everybody feels welcome, making sure that everybody has a place here and is not just free to contribute how they wish, when they wish, for what reasons they wish, but also have the resources to do so at their fingertips where they don't have to work so hard to make that happen.
Okay, thanks, Diego, for setting the stage of saying that the Monero community needs to be accessible and open, be approachable for people to want to get involved. Need Money 90, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. What's up?
Yeah, so building off of that, what's the best way to get someone from the stage of I'm paying attention to Monero to I have a fun little project to work on? Do we need to be open about these are nice little projects that you can work on? We need people to be making news content or any other information. How do we sort of cross the barrier from someone who's just a Monero fan to I love Monero and I'm an active Monero contributor?
So if you're looking to actually contribute to the community, there's two different ways you could go about it. One is if you already have a predefined idea that you want to actually see created, in which case, go for it or try and find people who are interested in helping you with it. If you don't have a ton of experience in the community or a lot of built up trust with the community members, you might find it difficult to find people who will work with you. But that just means that you need to either do it on your own or try and convince people. The other would be to contact either the Monero outreach work groups or any work group that has an association with something you're good at. It doesn't need to be code. Code, you can go to Monero Dev, that's easy. Or open GitHub issues or start fixing things. That's probably one of the lower barrier to entry things. The other stuff would be if you're bilingual or trilingual or whatever, you can go to the localization work group and help us with our strings. Honestly, just get yourself situated in some of our chat channels. Send a message to people, say, hello, this is what I'm good at, or I'm interested in helping out. And you'll find more than a couple people will speak up and tell you, hey, here's a couple things that we actually need done. So yeah, it's...
this is going to be an open question I'm going to put out. So when I generally tell people how they can get more knowledgeable and also to contribute to Monero, I generally refer them to the Monero Stack Exchange because they can read all the resources there. If there's a way for people to even start off by improving the grammar or updating sort of the updating the answers so that they're relevant for an update or whatever it might be. Do you think that that's a good approach, or do you think that it needs to be more specific than that, or another approach entirely makes sense for most people?
I think Stack Exchange, unless you're like pretty intimately familiar with the protocol, is going to be an exercise in futility. A lot of comments that you'll make or responses that you'll put up will probably be either less than the quality that's required for a Stack Exchange response, or if you're the kind of person who should be responding on Stack Exchange, you'll probably know who you are, but I don't think I would recommend a newcomer do that. Read up on answers there, sure.
All right, so Sarang, we sort of work together to help get newcomers involved by explaining things for people, or at least our intent is to sort of dummy down a lot of the content that's in the research paper into something that's at least a little bit more comprehensible. We did this for a bulletproof conversation where I had you on and interviewed you, and we spoke for, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half or so about what bulletproofs are, and in a way that is at least easier than reading a paper. Do you think that that's sort of good enough, or do you think we need to go an additional step to make it, much more approachable for people, even if the intent isn't to go straight into the cryptography, but just to have a good working understanding about Monero so that they can overall contribute to it better?
I mean, I think it's kind of a tough one, right? Because there's a whole lot of different things that go into Monero. And it's a lot of different pieces of math and cryptography that, I mean, to really fully understand how the protocol works, you've really got to grasp all of them. And to some extent, I think that, there's a level where we can kind of talk about, oh, this is kind of what stealth addresses do on a very broad level, and this is kind of what ring CT does. But at a certain point, like you kind of hit a spot where you kind of have to go into the math a little bit. And I guess I like the fact that we have different levels of resources available. We have Stack Exchange, which can be really good for specific questions that maybe don't need to get too technical, but can get technical if we need to. We have resources like Mastering Monero, which is great for kind of taking someone who has no idea what this is and kind of giving them kind of a first look at what it is. And then we have something like Zero to Monero, which is a great resource that I look forward to seeing updated, that is kind of the closest thing we have to a protocol specification. And I guess I like the idea of not necessarily having something that starts from the beginning and runs all the way down to the nuts and bolts, but have something that's ready and available for people at whatever level that they're at. And I think the bulletproof discussion was nice because it went just deep enough, I think, to get people interested to where they could maybe go to read the paper if they were at that level, or maybe get just interested enough to go and read something like Zero to Monero, for example. So I guess I really like the idea of just making very comprehensive resources available at whatever level our users might be at.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Do we need people that already know a lot to make these resources, or do you think that there's a way for people who are trying to learn more to sort of make it a research project that they do?
I'm not really sure. That's a very interesting question. I would say anything that kind of involves like the base level math or the cryptography, you've really got to know your stuff to be able to contribute well there. That being said, I don't think that should scare anyone away from getting involved. One thing that I've kind of at a broad level would like to see from the research side is for us to have more kind of small self-contained projects available to people who are, who are interested in Monero, who have kind of particular areas of expertise that may not align with those of other folks in the research lab area or channels, but still want to be able to contribute to self-contained projects. So I guess I'd like to see us become more accessible in that way from a research perspective. But at the same time, I guess I also acknowledge the fact that, being able to make kind of a comprehensive guide to something about Monero's protocols does require a certain level of knowledge already about those protocols. And I think to some extent that's kind of unavoidable.
Arctic Mine, you really enjoy explaining Monero's scalability properties. I know you gave the talk at DEF CON that it was understandable by many people. So what was your approach for taking, the complex issue of scaling? We've seen many debates within the Bitcoin community about how Bitcoin should address scaling, and there's a ton of disagreement there. How do you approach explaining such a complex topic for people, and what's the purpose, or what's your reasoning for really trying to do that?
Well, there's a couple of things. I actually got involved in Monero because of analyzing and studying scaling in Bitcoin. I was literally running searches in Bitcoin Talk regarding the scaling issues in Bitcoin, and I came in a post, I think it was on Risto Petilia, about MRO, which used to be before XMR came on, and I went into details of why this is just didn't mention what I was looking at, but at least at the time I had enough respect I said, okay, I'm going to take a look at it in detail. And then I realized it addressed fundamentally all of the concerns that I had about scaling in Bitcoin. Now, from a point of view of getting people involved, if I've shared my own experience, I was brought into the community because of a particular field. And then I recognized it wasn't that sometimes you can just specialize in something, make it work, and then contribute back. Now, I spend a lot of time researching this in Bitcoin, primarily as an investor. I was looking at it from the perspective, is this thing a viable investment? And then I realized when it came that Monero actually had the problem solved. And then it comes to the next stage where I say, well, okay, you have all this knowledge. Now I can contribute it back to the community. Are we having technical issues?
I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, okay. Now I can use that to contribute back to the community. Now, my opinion is a very critical component, but it's one that hasn't really been explored by a lot of people. It's a lot of opportunity if you want to get into this field, by the way, because it's totally separate from the cryptography aspect that, for example, Sarang was talking about. I mean, you can apply a lot of the very same formulas to another coin, such as, for example, Dogecoin or Bitcoin, but you have fundamental designs in the cryptocurrency that make it impossible. You need a tail emission, for example. And so that's the element. The point that I'd like to get across, though, is that when you're looking at contributing to a project, if there's something you're really knowledgeable and passionate about, and especially if a lot of other people aren't into that area, then it makes a lot of sense for you to contribute in that field. So for me, it was kind of an opportunity. This is something I can do, I can specialize on, I can contribute to the project in. And the fact that relatively few people are doing it is interesting because you try to complement what everybody else is doing. And that's kind of my feeling. The big focus for Monero is privacy, fungibility, and anonymity. I would take the point of view that Monero is uniquely positioned for on-chain scaling way ahead of any other coin. Way ahead of Bitcoin, for example. Because of certain characteristics of Monero that make that possible. And that surprises people because a lot of people think, well, wait a minute, the scaling debate in Bitcoin. Well, the scaling debate in Bitcoin is to a large degree driven by a lot of design flaws in Bitcoin itself, in my opinion, which materializes then in these human conflicts, social conflicts that we see. But yeah, but I think that's what I'm saying. So if there's something you're interested in an aspect of a project, and especially if it's something that's not being looked at a lot by other members of the community, that's a great opportunity to get involved. And you may actually be the pioneer, the person that actually is contributing where nobody else really has done a lot in that particular aspect of the project. That would be my sort of thought on the issue. And quite honestly, I'd love to see people learn more about blockchain scaling and the issues and the relationship to emission rates and the relationship to fees and how all these things interact together. It's quite a different aspect of the project from, say, a lot of the cryptography that we're working on. It is actually applicable to a lot of the projects, but it's very unique to Monero because Monero is very well positioned for that. So those are kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Arctic Mind. I'm going to switch to a very similar topic, just slightly different. So HYC, same major idea. You're looking for other contributors to participate in essentially reviewing and being a part of RandomX's development. Now, for those who have never heard of RandomX before or aren't very familiar with it, it is a proposed future proof of work algorithm for Monero with the intent to make it CPU friendly and ASIC resistant, so to speak, in the best way, the best approach that we know how. So I know that, Howard, you're generally targeting individuals that are very technical and can have the ability to review this code. But how do you go about approaching people who aren't currently in the Monero ecosystem and encourage them, basically get them to actually become a part of this project? Is that a difficult sell? Is that an easy sell? What's your general process there?
Well, that's an interesting question because, when I first came up with random.js and it was just myself, currently we have 3 people working on Random X, and the other 2 people just came up out of nowhere. So just following their own curiosity. So I didn't actually have to go hunt for anybody at the outset. I'm not sure how they heard about it, but whatever they did hear about it, they saw it as an interesting problem, as an interesting technical challenge. And I suppose that's the same thing, that kept me here myself, right? My own involvement in Monero has expanded over time from originally just looking at the database aspect to looking at other things, such as the network communication and now the proof of work. So it's just a matter of getting an idea in front of the right eyeballs, the right people who just have that kind of curiosity and they're looking for a technical challenge that that ignites their interest. Now, so that's one part of your question. You also asked about how we find reviewers, and that's a completely different set. We actually have 2 professional software review teams now putting proposals together for us. And before that, I also went into a couple of hardware discussion forums that I kind of participate in on a regular basis, and I noted the idea there. Said, hey, we've got this design put together. Would any of you guys who are, seasoned chip designers, give me some of your feedback on it? And it just went like that.
Awesome. One concern I generally have is that things sort of seem to have fallen in place for Monero so far, at least in this one way. Monero has a really unique idea. It was, perhaps the first cryptocurrency to really execute on the idea of having privacy on chain, and that drove some people together. I know that fluffypony spoke about how Monero's decision to use LMDB helped draw you in, and then we've sort of gone there. Monero's adaptive rock size helped draw Arctic mine in, and so Monero's been able to attract talent sort of seemingly out of nowhere. So my concern is, if Monero needs to continue attracting talent, to continue growing with the number of contributors, how can we really do that in a way that's better than just saying, well, we need to hope the right people show up at the right time? Or is that still kind of what we're in?
That's a good question, but where did DSC come from, who's now working on the GUI?
I don't. Do you know, or is that just?
No, I don't know. How did we find him? Did somebody chase him down, or did he come to us on his own?
I think he was around for a while in different capacities. His availability increased or something like that.
Medusa says that he recruited DSC.
Oh, okay. So I mean, there's going to be this combination, right? Like for instance, Brandon recruited his buddy, and so we had the 2 of them in MRL, and so there's going to be a combination of luck and actual recruiting, right? I mean, that's just the way things would naturally unfold.
I do want to say, though, if it's all right that I speak out of turn here, that I've heard of a number of people who have said that they would normally be contributing to Monero, but the code base is too imposing, or they're not sure where to start. And I think that we could make some progress there for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any specific recommendations there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the code base is the code base itself could definitely be cleaned up. I would say that certain aspects of it are a little bit redundant, like some data structure declarations are a bit redundant. Other aspects of it are well factored, like the core crypto stuff is pretty well done. But a lot of this stuff that approaches the business logic layers have been maintained by so many different people that it's just become a little bit of a rat's nest. And that's the sort of area that you actually want people to be contributing at.
Yeah. So that's the sort of thing that is going to take probably some active recruitment. You know, if you look at development that's going on now, we're still cranking on new features, and it would take some dedicated time to, for instance, go through and insert meaningful comments in all of these places where no comments currently exist. You know, to actually document the code base in a way that makes it friendlier for new developers to come on board. That's actually an heavily involved development task, and you know, right now we're focused on stabilizing and other new features and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a conflict that we would need new developers just to address that.
I would suggest, though, that there's the relatively strong argument that code that's well enough factored will end up in functions and modules that are effectively named and organized such that they comment themselves, or at least not 100%, you know, right? Because sometimes there's some like not clandestine, but like, you know, not completely obvious implementation detail or justification that is wrapped up in certain structures, certain code structures. But in those cases, it makes sense to comment it. But I tend to find that code that like really needs excessive commenting, there's probably an architectural problem there.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I mean, for my own experience, you know, I've worked obviously in the database side. I've done some stuff in the RPC and the wallet, and you know, for the most part, I've just found what I needed to find and started working on it. So
You're a superstar, so
thanks. But yeah, in any large code base, you know, the way to know where to find things is just to jump in and start reading. You know, it's like
it's true.
It's like reading a book. How do you get to understand what the story is inside this book? Well, you sit down and read it one page at a time, and that's just what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Howard and Paul. I'm going to move back to Sarang. So Sarang, we spoke. I mean, the other two spoke about a developer perspective, how to get more developers involved. Sarang, when you're at a conference and you're speaking with people about Monero, I know that you've been to academic conferences and you've been to less academic conferences or more educational or business-focused conferences, and you've had to speak with both sets of individuals about what you're doing with Monero. Have you had any success at speaking with them about Monero and then they later went to become more actively involved? And what were sort of the best ways that you've reached out to these people?
So we've always had kind of interesting relationship with academia, right? You know, to some extent, you know, a lot of academics kind of go off and start companies in this space and kind of make their stuff proprietary. You know, some academics stay very, very strictly within the university system and do kind of the publication there. But we have seen folks who've been really interested in Monero from an academic perspective and who appreciated the fact that it was so accessible from kind of a protocol perspective, and that there was so many interesting things to do and work on, and so many interesting open problems to solve that, you know, they have kind of collaborated with MRL and with other Monero researchers, you know, to kind of suss out, you know, interesting details about the protocol and about things that we could be doing. And I think in general, one thing that we've been getting better at, and I want to continue getting better at, you know, is making good relationships within the academic space. And that involves, you know, getting involved with folks who are working at universities, you know, and getting involved with other cryptographers who are working in other projects. You know, despite kind of the politics that, you know, some people seem to think exists kind of throughout all these projects, you know, a lot of cryptographers and mathematicians and researchers at other projects, you know, are surprisingly accessible and open to collaboration. And I have enjoyed seeing that, and I want to keep seeing that get better. And I think it really can.
Yeah, thanks, Sarang. So Binary Fate, I'm going to go back to you. So get ready here. So Binary Fate, you have built many applications on Monero. You've had the courage to build some of the first systems that Monero community has really used, including XMR.2 and many other things. What why do you think that you or what gave you the motivation to really go out and start doing this? And what can we do to get other individuals to get out and build other things on top of Monero too, like you've done?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. I struggle to hear the question because there's a lot of noise around here. We're having fun.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt your fun.
Yeah, you're asking how we can encourage people to actually build services and business on top of the Monero project, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. I think there's two aspects to that. The first one is that you can cater to people that are interested to do something they are passionate about, or that they are interested in the ethic of it, and they want to build something that goes in the same direction as their heart. And you can get a good bunch of very valuable and capable people doing that. And we actually see that very frequently in Monero. The second angle is that you try to be very, very factual and rational, and you just explain that basically you need fungibility if you want to build businesses. Whether you want to receive money, basically, cryptocurrency in the case of Monero, and not be liable for some crazy shit that happened from like two ownership down the line because of your customers doing shady stuff. Or also you don't want to reveal your financial transaction as a business, which is a fairly reasonable demand or baseline for businesses in general in a capitalist world. Businesses all fight in a mutually competitive environment, and you don't want to reveal information. You don't want to let everyone know how much you pay to your providers, you don't want to let everyone know how much you're investing in a new market. You don't want everyone to know how much you are getting from your customers and so on. And if you were to use something like Bitcoin, it's like it goes very head to head with the very basics of running a business. So then you can just explain everyone that building something on top of Monero is just the equivalent of building a business that utilize cash or the traditional financial system, but in the blockchain domain. And if you want to do that in the blockchain domain, there is really no alternative but Monero. I think that provides an equivalence in that your competitors are not going to look into your books. Your customers are not going to be threatened because everyone can know that they are using your service and by how much and so on. So I think you can just explain people that what they took for granted in the legacy traditional world that we knew and have been accustomed to, the usual financial system and the cash and fiat system. If they want to keep operating on the same premise, but in the blockchain universe, then there is no alternative but Monero. Otherwise, everything is just a step backwards, and it's just very threatening to any business.
Thanks, Binary Fate. So this is going to be an open question to really everyone. So Apple recently started an advertising campaign. This has nothing to do with what you think of Apple, but they have a campaign based off the idea of privacy matters. They show images, videos of individuals that are trying to protect privacy in everyday life. And then they say, if privacy matters to you in your normal life, it should matter to the phone that your life is on, is basically their marketing campaign. And sure, I promise I don't work for Apple. I'm not trying to promote their products, but is there something that the Monero community can learn from this advertising campaign in terms of getting people excited about the idea of using Monero and the idea of really protecting their privacy? Because generally at the moment we write privacy off as something that most people sort of don't really care about, or something that's really low on their list of actual priorities based off how they interact. So is this, from this ad campaign, is there something that we can learn? Can we learn from this in terms of getting the word of Monero out there? Why are we not?
Yeah, I could chime in on that. So I think that one of the reasons that Apple's message has some weight to it, or the reason that people are really paying attention to it. Diego, are you busting a jam to that pop music? Nice. So
Yeah, dude, you know it.
hell yeah. So like, I think that the reason why it has some weight to it is that Apple is already influential from a usability standpoint. A lot of people are using their products, and a lot of people are therefore paying attention to them. And one of the things that I've noticed with Monero is that you don't really get a ton of people using technologies that are not really that usable. And so I think that we could do a lot more to improve the reach of Monero, first of all, by improving its usability, which is something that Diego touched upon. I would love to see someone show up and add a My Monero iOS plugin for Apple Messages, for example, so that they could send Monero through Apple Messages, or an Apple Watch extension for the My Monero iOS application. Because, you know, the more usable and the more integrated these things are with people's ordinary lives, the more that people are going to start to realize that privacy is not something that that's out of their reach. And aside from that, I think that from a marketing standpoint, we can probably start to convince people a bit more effectively by telling them, by making it clear that this information that they expose in non-private manners can get stored forever and revealed by any disinterested party at the drop of a hat. You know, simply because those, you know, for example, corporations that are storing all of our information, they just don't care, and they're not really being held accountable. So if we show examples of like catastrophes that have happened, or the potential for that kind of thing to happen, and then we show people how easy it is, I think that could be effective.
I would kind of like to make a comment on this, and I think that one of the comments that I would make about Monero is that before you can even worry whether a transaction is fungible or not or private, you have to be able to transact. So it's actually a very basic element. If you want to compare Bitcoin's shortcomings, there are two shortcomings. One of them is the lack of fungibility, and the other one is the lack of being able to scale. They lack to be able to transact. Now, in the early Bitcoin, of course, assume that Bitcoin actually had addressed these problems, when in fact it hadn't. I mean, the 1 megabyte block limit was something that was added to Bitcoin about 18 months afterwards, in 2010. And at the time, fairly early on, it was assumed that the sort of pseudo anonymity that the Bitcoin transaction provided by decoupling the address from the identity of a person was enough to ensure fungibility and privacy, which in fact both have been proven incorrect. So my comment on this is that if we're going to, I think we have to look at scaling also as an issue, as something that Monero has addressed. The second thing I'd like to say is that excellence attracts excellence, and that goes a bit to the previous question. And that is, if you, for example, make it more usable, well, that's going to attract people to Monero just by that fact. I mean, that's an example. If you improve the quality of the code, then that's going to attract developers because they're going to find it easier to understand the code. And you can think of many examples of that, but the mere fact that you improve the Monero as a currency is actually going to attract that extra level of interest, of expertise, whether it's individuals, users, or whether it's developers, or whether it's contributors. And there's an element of excellence that attracts excellence. So it's not luck that we're getting people. We're getting people because we're doing things right. And I think that's an important thing to recognize. Now, come back to the Apple question. Apple, I think, is feeding on well-known concerns about privacy, particularly relating to Facebook, to the whole scandals around privacy. There's an awareness of privacy in the digital world now that wasn't the case even 2 years ago. And then you're basically capitalizing on it. So I think the lesson for us is it's an opportunity for us in the sense that there is a lot more awareness about privacy and fungibility now than there was even like a while back. And I think that's a lesson, I think, from that marketing campaign of Apple, is that they recognize that this is something to sell, and they're selling it. And that, I think, would be the lesson that I would suggest is important for Monero there.
So is that like a beacon of hope for Monero, that the idea of privacy isn't, you know, a foregone conclusion or just completely discarded by most people? If we have a large U.S. company that is marketing this specifically to people, is that a good sign to say there are people that still care about this and they're willing to use applications that prioritize this?
I would go further than that. I mean, I would say that there's been an enhanced awareness of privacy in a relatively last year to 2 years. And obviously, that's going to be very powerful for Monero. But Apple is responding to a trend. Large corporations like that tend to respond to trends. So they look at what's happening in the marketplace, and they say, okay, this is an angle for us. We could position ourselves in this element and say we're going to do about privacy. They're looking at a trend, and then they're going to position into that trend. So it's been a relatively short change. I would say probably in the last 18 months, 2-year range. Particularly, I would say, regarding a lot of the data leak scandals and so on. I mean, we can focus on things such as, for example, identity theft. That you have simply when you use a credit card with a merchant, the merchant gets hacked, and now your financial situation is compromised. You have zero control about this, and that's a major flaw in the fiat system, because it's a pool system. And with something like Monero, you transfer your funds and you avoid the hack. Now, that's even true of other cryptocurrencies. But I also want to come back to another point, and that is that Monero does something else in privacy, and something very critical, and that's on-chain scaling. And that really hurt Bitcoin. I mean, you saw it even before. I mean, I remember in 2013 buying a meal at a restaurant and paying with Bitcoin. It's not possible to do that today. Buying an item from a store that was maybe like $2 to $3 US. In fact, the specific item that I bought from a store in Vancouver was actually a cable for a 5.25-inch floppy disk, of all things. And I paid for it with Bitcoin. And the thing was like about $2. There's no way you can do that today with Bitcoin, because the transaction fee would just swamp the thing. So there's lessons. I think the second lesson for Monero is overall is that we also have the scalability, ability to transact on it. But yes, I mean, I'd say there's a trend towards awareness of privacy right now, and that's what Apple has responded to.
Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I just reiterating what Arctic Mind was saying. Apple is not setting a trend, but they are certainly responding to something, and that's good for us, because they're reinforcing this message. And privacy is one of our core messages. Yeah, so that's great. We might be able to ride on their coattails, ride that wave, but it still seems strange to me to say that a currency needs marketing, right? Dollars don't need marketing, euros don't need marketing, Swiss francs don't need marketing. So that whole question is a little bit odd about raising awareness and advertising, selling points, basically. But that's kind of the position we're in of what we need to do. It just feels like an odd position to be.
I agree that it feels odd, and you look at all these other fiat systems and you see that they don't need marketing necessarily, but that's because they have something else. They have deadly force behind them. The government is like, yeah, you're going to use this, so you're going to go to prison. And that's just the way that it is. And Monero doesn't have deadly force. Monero doesn't want deadly force. So in the place of compulsion for using Monero, we have to have something else. Otherwise, people aren't going to know that it exists. People aren't going to know that it uses it. So you're right. The US dollar doesn't need marketing in the traditional sense that we think of businesses marketing themselves. The marketing is the government, and that's the best marketing of all. And so we don't want Monero to have the government involved or compulsion involved or any of these things involved. So we need something else. Is it marketing in the traditional business sense? I don't know, but it has to be something else somehow, somewhere, because we lack that part of fiat currencies, and it's something that that they really benefit from in terms of awareness.
But yeah, just I thought the Apple privacy ad was very well done, and the message that they're sending is almost that could be exactly the same message that we've been sending, and especially when people ask you, well, why the heck do you need a privacy coin? I mean, that's everything in the Apple ad works to answer that question. It's good to pay attention to that. I mean, they are the wealthiest company in the world right now, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and I would just, this is XMR Scott. I would chime in a little bit on the Apple thing as well. Like, it's incredibly important that, like, because we're arguably to a certain degree like competing systems for payment, right? You can either pay with Monero or you can pay with like Apple's credit card. And Apple is kind of arguably to a certain degree lying or telling a like white lie when they say, Apple doesn't know what you're purchasing and so forth. Apple doesn't, but Goldman Sachs, and I forget what the payment processor was, if it was Visa or MasterCard, but they very much know those details. So it's kind of like, sure, Apple's kind of like marketing this privacy slant of, they don't know anything, but there are people within kind of that system that do. And so they're sort of selling this false sense of privacy, in my opinion. So we have to kind of, as a community, sort of fight against this false sense of privacy, whether it's companies like Apple or kind of like scam coins like Verge or, take your pick. Education, kind of an aggressive education almost, is very much important, I think.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Scott. I know you can only make it the last few minutes, so we're really glad to have you. Sorry, we weren't able to go through the full introductions. So we're a little over time, so I'm gonna begin wrapping up the coffee chat session. So Diego has plenty of time to speak about his very, very, very important topic. Is there any last piece of information that any of the contributors would like to get across besides, happy anniversary to Monero?
I'm opening a bottle of 2014 Barolo.
Yeah, I don't have the same pleasure, so a little jealous, but enjoy.
2014.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Binary Fate.
Jeremy is fine. I mean, you can call me like that in real life. Yeah, just maybe my last words, if you want to wrap up after that. But taking like a helicopter view on, also a scale like of my life, like. We are living in times where the technological progress is so quick that we can't keep up in terms of education. I remember I got internet when I was, I think, 16. And I'm so glad that I'm of the generation that actually knew what the world was before internet. And then I saw it coming. So I'm very, very thankful to actually live in the generation I'm living. But what we are seeing today, I think, is generally the world is like changing so quickly, and in like direction that are radically antagonists. So on the one hand, we have Facebook, Google, all these companies that are very data oriented, selling data, and at the same time, we have technology that is incredibly empowering. Like we have GPG, asymmetric encryption was invented in the 70s, but was not useful until we had emails for everyone in the 90s. And nowadays, we actually have tools in our hands to do crazy things in terms of communicating securely, to do a whole bunch of things that we couldn't do before in terms of interaction and protecting our privacy. And at the same time, the world is going like wild on, the opposite. So I think it's very, very it's an interesting time in general to be alive. No pun intended, but I'm thankful for today, even though I'm not thankful for today. But yeah, to wrap up, I would say that in those times where the world is like really pulling itself apart so quickly between these different forces of economic interest versus what we can actually do, all of us, like every day in terms of technology, like use GPG is like super basic, and since 10 years we can even exchange value in a secure manner with Bitcoin, and now since like 5 years we can exchange value in a secure manner that is also private. So it's so empowering, and it's so going against what is the momentum in general. So it's these are crazy times, but these are very, very interesting times. But what makes me optimistic is that I remember that Monero started with just a handful or just a very small group of people that were aligned on what they wanted to achieve. And when I see where we stand today after 5 years, honestly, yes, it's still a small project. Yes. I mean, yeah, I mean, it has, you can criticize that a lot, but what we achieved in 5 years makes me very optimistic in what we can achieve in the future in that world that is very, very right now critical because of the technology outpacing the education of most people actually involved in using the technology. So just looking at what we achieved and what we are doing like tonight makes me optimistic over what we will do next. So we'd like just to finish on a positive note that makes me personally very, very enthusiastic about the next year to come, because there are people that are willing to fight. There are people that are willing to educate others. There are people that are willing to put their fingers on what actually matters. Yeah, I love that. And I love you all for taking part. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just a tiny little side note also from our side. I mean, we've been all hosting this a whole day of Monero 5-year anniversary experience, and it's really a fun time. And we've been recapping the last few years. You know, Justin, you've been here in our space, and maybe all these viewers of the stream can't really see it, but it's a tremendous place for people to gather. Jeremy's here, like Parasef has been contributing tonight, and we've had this full day of Monero experience, like really thinking what's been happening. And with C3, like in Leipzig, the last couple of years, like we met fluffypony there, like in the early days. And it's really it's a movement, it's a community, and it's friends actually happening to meet each other in real life and discussing all these specific intrinsic values that the community actually brings into place. And that's what I'm really, really thankful for. You know, it's like people, intelligent people meeting each other and discussing actual topics that are really so important for everyone in the future. You know, it's about fungibility, it's about privacy by default. That's what I'm saying. And it's great that everyone gets together and gathers not only for the 5th anniversary, but for the 10th anniversary to come. And it's great that everyone was participating tonight. So it's really cool. And we'll keep on working on that. And we have our research part to it. And I don't know, maybe Parasef, you also want to join in for a second?
Yeah, I just really want to say thank you to everyone who was participating today. Not everyone, only who was today at the taking part of this live stream, but also at everyone who was not maybe voicing their concerns now, because there's a lot of people who want to stay in the shadows or who don't want to be maybe so active, but there's a lot of people who I think are maybe participating in this whole thing, And I think it's very important to, and I'm also very grateful to be part of this community. I think we achieved a lot in the past years, and I think we will achieve so much more in the next years. Privacy will be a so important topic in the next years. There's a lot of things we have to take. There's a lot of things that are changing, and the whole debate is also changing. We see a lot of attacks on our privacy context, and we see that privacy is at stake, especially in the European Union, where we see that a lot of things or a lot of privacy rights are actually taken from people. Sometimes like really fast, and we have to somehow regain this kind of privacy. And I think that like private currencies is still a very strong topic that we have to somehow democratize. We see this in Bitcoin, and we see in a way there's a lot of people demonetizing and talking about that Bitcoin somehow did exactly the opposite to what we tried to achieve with Monero in a way.
Totally.
So there's a lot of there's this kind of ongoing debate about like this privacy versus transparency thing that is like actually happening. So we have in a way the situation that Bitcoin created the most transparent kind of financial transaction situation that we have right now. So basically everyone is super transparent. So we have to think about, is that what we want as a society? Is that something that actually brings us forward? In the end, this becomes like super political to some sense as well.
Yeah.
Because if we see the whole Brexit debate as a kind of a financial privacy as well, this shows us that the whole world is actually in a way not so easy, and we see that actually cryptocurrency in a way just replicates this kind of space that we have, or this kind of political situation, the political condition that we have already, and we have to see and we have to ask ourselves, do we want to really commit to this kind of transparent society right now? And there's a lot of things that we can actually target this kind of questions. There's, for example, the situation that a lot of situations, especially in the European Union, and a lot of like legal constitutions are like that, that legally specific states can basically survey you. There's a lot of attempts to conquer that. There's, for example, actually even from a hardware perspective, attempts to conquer that. There's, for example, the Librem hardware approach. There's a lot of different things we have to basically look into. And we have to also teach people how to regain their privacy. I think this is a major thing that we also, as I mean, me personally as a person, but also as an institute, as right, we are actively tackling that and trying to basically communicate that to the wider masses. But in a way, it's always this kind of question of like, what do we want to achieve with that? Are we basically in a way fighting this war against terrorism, all this kind of like blunt stories that are told in order to keep away, or like to in a way like actually make it like more complicated for us, for like people who are like privacy preserving, who are like maybe coming from the cypherpunk movement and like trying to make sure that people can regain their privacy. Actually having a hard time to do that and like to convey that to people, because there's this kind of ongoing like war against terrorism and this kind of shit. While privacy is important, also terrorism has to be stopped, of course, yeah. But we cannot actually in a way give up so many of our rights. This is insane. We have been fighting for so many things. Looking at the internet, basically, a lot of things that we have been fighting against, and a lot of things we got with the internet have been in a way revoked and lost. Insane. We have to somehow regain this kind of privacy. We know how to regain, and we have to actually make sure that this kind of technologies are available to people. It's insane that with Bitcoin somehow the opposite is like happening. We have to somehow fight for this kind of momentums that we have these kind of situations happening again.
Okay, so I think to summarize, education, and we are the forerunners. Maybe we are more aware than the masses of what is going to be probably considered human fundamental rights very soon, like financial privacy and so on. I think we will finish on that from our side. Back to you, Justin.
Okay, thank you all three of you for participating, and of course, thank you so much to Binary Fate, HYC, Need Money 90, Arctic Mine, XMR Scott, Sarang, Endogenic, and anyone else that I missed that participated in the coffee chat. Of course, rehrar, but he's up next with the important event. So for the sake of time, I'm going to hand it off straight to Diego, who has a really, really important talk prepared. I hear it's the best rant he's going to give all year. Do you think that's a good way of selling it, Diego?
I definitely agree with that type of with that analysis. Justin has not heard this talk, but he has heard me talk about this talk, and he's really confident that this is the one that it's going to be. We're going to be talking about, in particular, how to care for your long hair. So shampoo, conditioner, that kind of stuff is extraordinarily important, but your choice of which one that you are going to use is just as important as using them to begin with. That's actually not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about privacy today. Why is privacy important? Kind of privacy in the area of cryptocurrencies. It's something that's extremely overlooked. And you know what? That's one of the big things that we like to do is try to educate people on why is privacy important and all this different kind of stuff. And I have noticed something. Every once in a while, the community funds me to go to this, that, the other conference in Las Vegas and whatever place. I go to different conferences, right? And what I have discovered as I sit in my little Monero table and wait for people to come by for me to talk to them about Monero is I am very rarely selling Monero as a coin. Like I'm very rarely selling this coin. I find that I'm more often selling an alternative worldview, a different worldview to what people are used to. It's a worldview where privacy is important. It's not taken for granted. Privacy and security are top priorities for people and for society. And if you grab onto this worldview, if you understand this worldview, then Monero sells itself. It becomes extremely self-evident as to why something like Monero needs to exist in the world. And the failings of Bitcoin as well really kind of become self-evident. But if you don't latch on to this worldview, if I try to talk with you about it, you're like, I don't really buy into this. Well, it's okay to be wrong, first of all. But second of all, they're not gonna really get Monero. It's just not going to make sense to them. Why is this necessary? What does it have over Bitcoin? Nothing is their response. If you don't grasp this worldview, you're not going to understand Monero. More often than not, so, just to summarize that little piece, more often than not, I find myself selling a worldview more than I am selling a coin. And that worldview is privacy. In fact, I would say like 90% of my words when I'm speaking at these conferences is not, I only talk about Monero the very last 10% of my rant. And then because I'm like, so everything I just described, yeah, Monero basically does that. And they're like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. And so it's helpful to kind of look at the past of cryptocurrencies, kind of look at the past of privacy, and kind of like Matthias was saying, in the EU and in other places, privacy is under attack in various capacities. So Justin sent me a cool little outline that I've got on my phone. He's like, here, Diego, don't deviate from this. Otherwise, you're going to go on for 3 hours and we will lose all of our viewership. He didn't actually say that. But for just as a small, quick reintroduction, my name is Diego Salazar. Rehrar. I do some stuff about in some things in the Monero project. I run Cypher Market, a little business. I work on the website, and I made these little guys, which you'll be able to purchase at some point here pretty soon, one day. So first off, I want to kind of talk about, well, I guess I want to start this conversation off kind of looking at the history of Bitcoin, kind of looking back when cryptocurrencies first started and the pseudonymity of Bitcoin and exploring the question, was it enough then? Is it enough now? Why not? Because really Bitcoin, if we're honest, it sets the standard for everything. Everybody knows Bitcoin. Mostly everybody respects Bitcoin in some capacity. And it's the gold standard for cryptocurrencies. And a lot of the Monero people think that it fails spectacularly in terms of privacy. But let's take a look, right? Was Monero private enough way back then? So back then, you know, not Monero, Bitcoin. Bitcoin has always been open and public and transparent. There has never been a time where it has been similar to Monero and they chose to forego that technology for some reason. It's always been open and transparent. The issue is, so I would argue actually that Bitcoin was private enough back then, even though it was just pseudonymous, not anonymous. And the reason I would argue that is because it was so new that nobody was thinking to track these things. So for those of you who don't know, metadata kills. Metadata is that type of thing like the subject line of your email, or how long were you on a call? It was 37 minutes. Or who were you talking to? Well, like it was between this person A and person B. This is all metadata. So it's not the actual content of the call. It's not the actual content of the email. It's just kind of the things about it. But a lot of things can be deduced from metadata. As an example, if the location of a call, my call, is on a bridge somewhere, and the recipient of my call is a suicide prevention hotline, you know, you don't know the contents of my call, but just from those two metadata points, you can maybe deduce what the content may have been. And so, you know, there's a very famous quote by some governmental agency. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is, but we have killed based off of metadata is what it said. Metadata is enough to incriminate people. Metadata is enough to kill some people, to take away some people's freedoms. So, but that metadata has to be collected. Like if I make a call and it lasts 30 minutes, but nobody thinks to write down somewhere that this call lasted 30 minutes, then that will be kind of lost in time, and nobody will ever know. So when Bitcoin kind of first started and all these transactions were going around, we do have the record of these transactions existing, which Bitcoin went where, but nobody was really thinking that this was going to be a big thing. I don't think anybody was really caring so much to track all of this metadata about who was online at what times and cross-reference that with people who have downloaded Bitcoin and all these different types of things. So I would argue that Bitcoin was good enough, privacy-wise, fungibility-wise, with the pseudonymity that it had. But then as it gains in popularity and more eyes look at it and more people look at it and they start saying, hey, this is something big. And I understand that if I start taking this metadata and I start collecting this metadata, when is Diego downloaded the Bitcoin Core software? What times is he online? What times is this other person that he is known to deal with online? Okay, there's a transaction that happened in Diego's prime online times and received at this other guy's prime online times. Maybe I can connect this person to that person, or these people to those people. And now that people know to collect the metadata around these transactions, you can be sure that it is being collected. So then the question becomes, is Bitcoin now private enough with this metadata being collected? The answer, I believe, is a resounding no. So the question then becomes, is Monero private enough with this metadata that's being surely collected around the Monero transactions? And my answer is, we are still doing a whole lot of research to figure that out. I would say mostly yes. But it's very hesitant. There's a huge asterisk there with a lot of other things going on in there, because privacy is really, really hard. Let me say that again. Privacy is really, really hard. Let me say that a third time for you people that you just can't get it in your heads. Privacy is really freaking hard to get right. You can't just bolt it on. You can't just say, we're going to throw Tor on this and it's going to work. None of this works, guys. Privacy is so difficult because people will find ways to not only compromise your software, but there's certain metadata being collected that you never considered. And then for some reason that just completely exposes you and you're completely screwed. And all it takes is one breach of your privacy. And from there, just all these things just start connecting the dots and things just start making a lot more sense, because we are, whether we like it or not, we are entangled in a web of society. And I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but we are entangled in this web of society. And to kind of get this point across, most people know that Facebook collects all these information about everybody. Let's say I don't have a Facebook. I've never had a Facebook, and so you can't find me on there. Facebook probably still knows that I exist, simply because if my family uses Facebook, if my friends use Facebook, and they say, oh, look, I'm over here at this coffee shop with person X, person Y, and person Z, all of which are on Facebook, so you can tag them, and Diego. And Facebook's like, Diego. Okay, we don't have Diego in our database, but we also have somebody else named Salazar who's talking about Diego, and this other person in the same town who's talking about Diego. So from this web, they can kind of see that Diego exists, and also they can kind of see the things that Diego does, the people he hangs out with, the places he spends his money, because not because I'm giving them that data, but because a whole bunch of other people are giving them clues, and from all of those clues they can put this together. So there's this big gigantic web, and I liken privacy to driving. Even if I am the best driver there is, the safest driver there is, I take zero chances. It's not me that I have to worry about on the road. It's everybody else. It's that one random drunk driver who could still kill me even if I'm the safest guy. And even then, all it takes is one failure on my part to be a safe driver. I could be a safe driver 99.999% of the time, but on the 0.0001% where I'm not safe, maybe that's all it can take as well, in the sense that your privacy is only as strong as your OPSEC during your entire lifetime. Because once privacy is given away, it can't be taken back. So all of these little points that I'm trying to make, if it seems like I'm jumping around a little bit, let me just pull it back into this one area where privacy is extremely difficult, and it's even more so now that there is the technology enabling passive surveillance, so people can collect all this metadata and store it basically for free. In fact, it's cheaper it's more expensive to throw data away than it is to throw it at this point, just in terms of the returns that you get on it, as well as people giving away their data freely to things like social media sites, surveillance capitalism, all this kind of stuff going on. So not only is this stuff being taken in passively, but also when you are looking at things like Monero, or you are a face in Monero, anyone like Justin or Francisco or myself, who we have our faces and names associated with the project, you can be sure you're on a list somewhere. Privacy is really difficult. And so Bitcoin, with its open, transparent nature, with its ability to look at all of these outputs going here, there, and elsewhere, and it's just not good enough anymore because of all of these other connecting points of metadata around them. It's getting more and more trivial every day to point which transactions go where, when, why, how. So maybe, if you started way back when Bitcoin first started and you still haven't moved your coins, you're probably safe, because nobody was thinking to collect metadata back then. But even this statement is based on the assumption that nobody was thinking to collect that metadata back then. Maybe there was somebody that was. And if so, then all of this is moot. So, Monero, we make no guarantees in terms of 100% privacy. I don't think any serious privacy project does. Tor does not, I2P does not. All of them have a threat model. All of them talk about the weaknesses of their different threat models and stuff like that. If anyone tries to sell you 100% privacy, 100% untraceable, they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea how privacy works. They really just don't. Privacy is a bunch of tools in a big tool belt, which includes things like open source software, which includes things like Tor for privacy and IP addresses, and Monero for privacy and finances. And it's really interesting, because before Monero, there wasn't really a tool for absolute privacy. I say absolute, but I have quotes around that. Privacy in terms of finances. So before, even if you had a dark web website and stuff, if they can track down your server, then they just follow the money. Who paid for this? Now with something like Monero, it's becoming more difficult to do that as well, which is good in some ways and bad in other ways. Another issue before I move on that I would like to address, because I did just mention the dark web and kind of following the money here, and maybe that's used to catch criminals, which we usually agree is good, but I'll be honest with you guys. Monero is very much like the atomic bomb of the financial world. The atomic bomb can do a lot of damage to a lot of people. it can. And so the question is, should this thing even exist? Should this thing even exist? It does exist, so we can't just like make it not exist or forget it exists. It does exist. The question is, should this even exist? And so, I've had discussions with several people that I just feel uncomfortable with something like Monero existing. It would enable a lot of bad things, to which I can't deny. That's definitely true. It can enable a lot of bad things, but the way that I look at this, this powerful privacy is, you have a saw, a regular saw, if you can imagine a regular saw, and I can cut down a tree at a certain pace with that saw. So I can do good, honest, regular work with that saw. I can also cut apart a human body at a certain speed with that saw. So I can do damage, destruction to humanity with this tool. Now, the upgrade of a saw is a chainsaw. And with a chainsaw, which I have used before, my father-in-law has some nice little cool land in the woods. And so I used a chainsaw. We were cutting down some little itty bitty trees. I can cut down this tree much faster with a chainsaw, but I can also cut a human apart much faster. I can do damage to humanity much faster with it. For every single tool that exists, you can do good things with it and you can do bad things with it. And the more powerful the tool, the faster you can do good things, the more good things you can do, and the faster you can do damage with something like this. So the question is, should this technology even exist? That's a question for the philosophers to talk about. The fact of the matter is, it's here. It's here right now, and we can't really put the cat back in the bag, man. It's already here. The best we can do is try to move the project in the direction that we think is best for the world and for humanity. So anyway, sorry to go to that little morality side note. It is something that I actually get asked quite a lot when I talk about these types of things, because it does enable a lot of good things. It enables a lot of people to hide from totalitarian regimes. It enables a lot of people to hide their wealth from people that might otherwise steal it. But it might enable a lot of things that some might consider bad. So let's go ahead and keep going. Let's keep talking. So, Bitcoin has some of these cool things. They're like, yeah, guys, we understand. Bitcoin is not private. A lot of Bitcoin people say Bitcoin's not private, but see, we got things like Lightning Network that's really going to help. We got things like CoinJoin that's really going to help. And then some forks from Bitcoin happen, and they're like, yeah, see, we like this whole CoinJoin thing, and we put it in by default. So like, all the stuff, how the mixing happens, or it's heavily encouraged, or any of this type of stuff. And we put Tor on there, and we did a whole bunch of other things. So the question becomes, is Monero going overboard with privacy? Is Monero really, maybe the CoinJoin is enough? Maybe it's enough. Let's talk about that. Guys. Is CoinJoin technology enough? Is this kind of mixing coins, trying to wash your coins, is this enough? Is it enough to get people off of your trail? The jury is largely still out on this, but it's leaning towards no. It's leaning towards this idea that your coins can still be followed. And if you do some research on the internet, do some Googles, listen to some stories, some might say, well, it's just fear mongering. They're not true. It needs to be verified, and fair enough, but you're going to come across some, where people have like, well, I did mix my coins, or I did do these things. And then all of a sudden my transaction got canceled. There was actually one on the Reddit for Monero that was linked to the Bitcoin, where a guy was saying, I washed my coins, I mixed my coins, and my thing still got shut down. How did this happen? It's honestly looking like the answer is no. And once again, people just look at this CoinJoin, this mixing in a vacuum, as opposed to along with correlating metadata. They just think, oh, well, in a vacuum, if you look at the blockchain, it should be hard to follow. Yes, this is probably largely true, but the blockchain does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in a largely connected world where all of this metadata will help you kind of say this coin was starting at Diego and went elsewhere to this other guy that we know. And in fact, we at Monero and the MRL and all these people believe that not only is CoinJoin not enough, the question is not, is CoinJoin enough? The question is Monero enough? Do we need to up the ring size? Do we need to, are we good enough? Because privacy is hard, and we really just don't know sometimes. There are some days where it's like, yes, definitely, this is the best that we have, and Monero is good enough. And there are some days I'm like, oh man, guys, what are we doing? Oh, there is no way. But I would rather not back down from a challenge like this, because people don't make history books by backing down from difficult things. No, people make history books because they look at a challenge, they look at something hard, and they say, we're going to do this and we're going to do this right. And it changes the world. That's what I want to be. I want to be a world change maker kind of guy. Anyway, don't go very deep into history since fluffypony already covered this point. Stress that blah, 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 blah. Monero got better. Zero coin and Zcash. Yeah. Zero coin and Zcash. So, Monero is not the only privacy coin, as they are coined, that the coined term privacy coin, which I think is a misnomer, and a lot of people would agree with me. I think that things like Bitcoin and stuff should be called transparency coins, and things like Monero should be called cryptocurrencies, because privacy should be the default, as opposed to having a segment of cryptocurrencies called privacy coins. But anyways, cryptocurrencies, there's a few other ones that have different privacy schemes. You know, Monero uses a combination of 3 privacy technologies. We use ring signatures, we use ring CT, and we use stealth addresses. And the idea is that each of those limits metadata in some way, and where the weaknesses of one start, the strengths of another begin. Wait, where the strengths of one stop, forget it. You guys know what I'm saying. They cover for each other. They help each other. So, and the actual cumulative effect of the privacy is more than the sum of their parts in this particular case. So, and then pretty soon, you know, Tor and I2P will be integrated as well, which will also be helpful. But there does exist other privacy technologies, other ways of trying to mix coins that are not things like CoinJoin. And this is things like the Zero Coin protocol as implemented in something like Pivx, I think is the biggest one, which is a hilarious name. But that aside, it's good that they have this implementation. And Zcash is the other big one that most people know, which implements the Zero Cash, not Zero Coin, but Zero Cash, which is based off of the Zero Coin, but it's its own thing. Zero Cash technology, which I think most people here would agree is stronger than Monero when used Z to Z and used consistently and by default. And it scales better and all this different kind of stuff. But there's this big asterisk because Zcash's actual implementation is not the kind that advocates for default privacy. And that's a big poking point that we use with them. But there are these other things that exist, and they all have their pros and cons. And I think this is one of the big things to understand, is that all of this is a pro-con game. All of this is a weigh the strengths and the weaknesses of this. For example, in adopting the privacy technologies that we have in Monero, we have sacrificed scalability to a degree. To which degree? We don't know yet, because cryptocurrencies are not used far and wide, and we don't see how they scale for reals. But we have sacrificed scalability to a degree. Each individual transaction, meaning each individual block, is much larger. Even with the bulletproof shrinkage, which is awesome, it is still much larger than an average Bitcoin transaction. Just because in addition to all of the normal information about who's sending to what, where, with the block headers and all this different kind of stuff and the transaction stuff, we also are layering on these obfuscation, encryption, privacy enhancing technologies. And that takes up space because that's being stored on the blockchain indefinitely. So Bitcoin does have the advantage that it scales a degree better. Again, which degree? We don't know, and people have different opinions, but it does scale a certain degree better than Monero does. In a sense, you know, if you talk with Arctic Mind, he'll talk with you, okay, I'm a dynamic block size, blah, blah, blah. You know, we can go down that rabbit hole as well. But it is something that we sacrifice. You know, Monero transactions are bigger. So all of this is kind of pros and cons. All of this is weighing this stuff. And Zero Coin and Zero Cash each have their own pros and cons as well. For example, Zero Cash, Zcash, as most of us know, has a trusted setup. In order to get this fantastically scaling, fantastically private technology to work correctly, it has to be set up initially by somebody. And if that initial setup is compromised, then that individual can print free money for infinity time and nobody would be able to catch it. As well as some people, you know, recently people like Peter Todd have been skeptical about the claims that a compromised startup ceremony would not compromise privacy. Maybe it might. There's not enough research into that area right now. So I can't say one way or the other, but there are pros and cons. And Monero may not be the best way. Monero may not be the best way. I'll say that again. people are often surprised to find out that I am not a maximalist. I am not a Monero maximalist. It is not Monero or the highway for me. I constantly publicly say I own only Monero. I don't own really anything else. I own a little bit of TerraCoin because I did a little bit of website for them before I saw the light, and then they paid me in TerraCoin, and now I have TerraCoin. So yeah, you can look that up if you want. It's not much money. I basically only have Monero. And the reason is not because I'm a maximalist and it's like, well, if Monero fails, then I just want everything to fail. It's because I don't believe Monero has any good competition right now. I want Monero to have competition because competition drives the whole space forward, but there is not anybody that's willing to commit hardcore to having a privacy by default and mandatory type thing. Nobody else has really done that. There's a couple of little players, and we'll see where they end up, and that's kind of exciting. But by and large, nobody has really committed to that kind of thing because they're worried about, well, what about the governments, and what about shutting us down, and what about this X, Y, and Z. So if something else comes along, great. And if Monero itself is merely a stepping stone to a better cryptocurrency that is private by default, fungible, all these different things. If Monero is just a stepping stone so that we can have that, then by all means, let Monero die in its proper time so we can have that thing. All I care about is private digital money that is fungible, that is available to the world to protect humanity. That's what I care about. And if Monero is that, great. If Monero is a stepping stone, great. Let it be that. And who knows, maybe one day I will jump ship. I'll say, see you all, you've annoyed me too much, and I'm going to go work on something else. And if that's the case, I could never do that to you guys. Come on, there's too much heart here. There's too many connections.
It's more likely that binary fate would just steal all the money from us playing poker, but you know, I digress.
So he will own all of the Monero pretty soon. He's pretty soon here. So that's kind of my, I kind of jumped to kind of my position on maximalism and that kind of thing, but kind of going back to zero coin and zero cash, there are alternative privacy implementations going on, and it's so important that they exist. Some people might disagree with that, but to me, in my opinion, it is so important that these things exist. And the reason is all of cryptocurrency is just one big gigantic experiment. None of us know whether any of this is actually going to work. And science is very cool in that the goal is for science to be reproducible, as in if somebody conducts an experiment, I should be able to do the exact same things with the exact same methodology, apply the exact same statistics, and get the same results. And so that reproducibility is definitely a core part of science. But if the only experiment that science ever did was the same experiment, then we would not have very many scientific advancements. So it's important that we do have all of these other alternative implementations, most of which I expect will fail. And then we can do an autopsy after they've died and see, okay, why did they die? Maybe it was a social thing. Maybe it was a failure of the technology or the cryptography or the privacy or anything like that. It's important that these things exist so that we can see largely kind of what comes out and keeps going. That's not to say that the best technology always wins. But it's important that they exist for science. As well, I guess one last little rabbit trail I want to go down in regards to Bitcoin. Everybody is always talking about mass adoption, kind of for cryptocurrency as a whole, kind of especially for Bitcoin. You know, we want to see Bitcoin adopted. We want to see it go places. If I may make another shocking statement, I would fight tooth and nail against Bitcoin being adopted globally, just because of the ability that it gives regimes around the world to track people's finances at an unprecedented level. As Bitcoin becomes more and more adopted, I will fight that it does not. I do not want it to become adopted. For those of us in the first world, I say this often, for those of us in the first world, oftentimes the worst thing that we have to deal with our lack of privacy is things like targeted ads. But many times in regimes that are much worse, these people face very serious consequences for the lack of privacy. And it's so funny to me that things like Bitcoin constantly talk about being currency for the world, currency for everybody, something that everyone can use. But when you really dig down deep, it's not currency that everyone can use, because the lack of privacy is appalling, and it is very destructive to certain marginalized people groups in different places. it's a classic case of very smart people, oftentimes developers or these types of things, very smart people developing solutions that users don't actually need. This is what Bitcoin is, because these people don't just need censorship resistance. They don't just need immutability. They also need privacy. They are not a coin for the world. They are a coin for the first world who don't have severe consequences for lack of privacy. Although the consequences in the first world are getting more severe as time goes on. But they really are not a coin for those people that desperately need it the most. In the same way, I can look at Monero and give a similar criticism. While Monero does have that ability that Bitcoin does not, because of Monero's bigger transactions and because of Monero's bigger fees, maybe it's not going to be worth it in Venezuela, where they get paid a couple of dollars a month to pay for slightly higher fees to send Monero, although this isn't as big of a problem now that we have bulletproofs. But maybe even those couple of cents or those 10 cents, they won't be able to afford that. So that's not going to be an option for them. So we have to find ways to optimize those types of things as well. So Bitcoin and all the other things like Bitcoin, even though they keep saying we are a currency for the world, we want mass adoption, all this kind of thing, that they really are not looking at the needs of people and meeting those needs, which is a classic UI UX failure. We're not actually looking at the goals of the users. We're building what we think they want. This is also called colonialism, by the way, where we decide for other people what they need and what they want. So the fact of the matter is, though, even though there are a few other privacy implementations, most coins are either building completely transparent solutions, maybe because it's easy, because you just fork Bitcoin and you make a few changes, or maybe because they're scared of retaliation from the state or whatever their reasoning might be, or they do subpar implementations of privacy. And I'm not talking about if they choose zero coin or zero cash or anything like that, although I have opinions on those as well. I'm talking about this idea that they do privacy, not by default. It's kind of opt-in. It's going to be more expensive. And really, all of this just points back to PGP. It likens to PGP for me. For those of you who don't know, PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy. It is a way in which people can encrypt messages kind of over email or text or sign things. And it was invented quite some time ago. It was supposed to kind of be the holy grail of privacy. The goal was to have all of the emails and all of the everything integrate PGP at some point, and now we have things like Proton Mail and Tutanota that do it by default. But the sad reality is PGP is a hot sack of garbage. It does its job, but the UI, the user experience of PGP is just horrendously bad. It is laughably bad. It is so hard to set up. It is so hard to comprehend. It is so hard to keep track of your keys and make sure that they're safe, and the idea of cycling your keys every once in a while to make sure that they don't get compromised. And PGP is so bad. It is a dumpster fire. It is hot garbage because of the user experience. And it has the potential to do some great things, but it's just not ever going to do those things. Whereas you have something like Signal or Wire, which are messaging apps, and they do encryption kind of by default. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. There are a couple of extra steps, in terms of verification, if you want to do those steps to make sure you're talking to the person who you are talking to, but those aren't required. And they're actually not super hard to do. So in that particular sense, what I did with my parents, I put Signal on their phone. I put it as their default messaging app, and they don't think twice about anything of it. They just kind of send messages with Signal. It works the same as regular stuff, except now it's encrypted. And so now I speak with them encrypted. Mwahaha, you don't know that I'm asking my mom to get me some milk from the grocery store. Because we only have one car and my wife takes it to work. Anyway, now that you guys know about my life. So the point is that something like Signal takes these hard concepts of things like encryption, and it brings them down to a level where anyone can use. And so then you see these privacy implementations on alternative blockchains. You see things like Dash. You see things like Zcash, or where you have to go through extra steps, where you have to understand more, maybe have more powerful hardware just to be able to use this. just to be able to understand this, to get your wrap your head around what you're doing and why you're doing it. And oftentimes the resources needed are also larger. You need to pay a larger fee. Maybe like I said, you may need a stronger computer, a stronger phone, or maybe phones can't do it at all because it's so much bigger. And so ultimately you're just putting this wall, this barrier of entry for people to use it. And nowadays, what is PGP used for? Very few people actually use PGP. Some people do. A lot of people will put their fingerprint on their Twitter. So like if you go to my Twitter, you'll see that I put my PGP fingerprint there, and oftentimes it's used as kind of this badge of honor. I not only know what PGP is, I have set it up, I have this key. So it says like I'm a serious privacy guy. I have gotten a few emails in PGP, which is always kind of fun. I'm like, ooh, look at this. I'm going to go ahead and decrypt this, and it's kind of fun. But for the most part, it's not really used for the goals that it was intended to be used for. And so that's largely what I see in terms of Zcash and these others. And I do hear that Zcash wants to go Z to Z, so encrypted by default and mandatory. And when they do, great, more power to them, 1,000 times yay. In the meantime, they have a product that nobody is using. The only people that are going to use it are the tech nerds that are like, ooh, yes, I know how to send a Z to Z transaction, and that's what I'm going to do. Ha ha ha. Whereas something like Monero, you use Monero and you send it, and you don't have to really think about the obfuscation and encryption. You don't have to think about any of this stuff. It just happens. And yes, there are suboptimal ways to use it that can kind of out you more than most. But by and large, especially because everybody is hiding in the crowd of everybody, if everybody uses Monero, by and large, it just works. You don't have to think about it. And anything that makes people think anything when using a product is really bad. I don't know if any of you guys know anything about UI UX, okay? But like, you don't want people to think about anything when they're using your thing. Intuitive, as defined in UX circles, is this idea that there is a trial and error process of one. As in, somebody is introduced to a new software and they have a goal. They want to accomplish something. It's a new interface. They've never seen it before. But rather than having to try one thing and it fails, and then they stumble upon the right thing, they try once and they meet their goal. Just because the entire interface, it is so blatantly obvious how to achieve their goal that this is what they do. This is the definition of intuitive, just this trial and error of one. That is all that is needed because the whole interface speaks for itself. If things are not intuitive in terms of using privacy, people will just not use it. And that is the sad, sad reality. If we don't make it so stupid simple to use, then people will not use it. And we want people to use this. We want people to use this. Even the people that don't necessarily need it, at the very least, it's not like they're hurting themselves as using it, but at the very best, they're providing a bigger crowd for those that do need it to be able to take advantage of that. So, we need to make it extremely stupid simple. That's one of the things that I'm working on behind the scenes a whole lot. You would be shocked about how many wallets of how many cryptocurrencies and how many banking applications, just all mobile, desktop, everything I've been looking at to try to understand a lot of these things and how they're used and why. And I've gotten into arguments with Justin and the GUI team and all these different things about this is something I'm passionate about, about making these things simpler and why, because Monero has a lot of great technology like subaddresses and that's actually what I was arguing with Justin about the other day, where we're arguing about how to best use subaddresses because they have the potential to be confusing. And the more you have to explain, developers have this idea that as long as your documentation is good enough, as long as you have the words to explain, great, that's good enough. People will read the stuff. Nobody reads the stuff. Nobody reads the stuff. Nobody reads the stuff. Should they? Sure. Will they? No. Anyway, so that's kind of just as my whole little rant on this UI UX of privacy type thing. And I am actually really happy to say that even though Monero may not take it as seriously as I'd like, by and large, Monero community, because Monero does not exist. You guys know what I mean. Monero exists, but it is definitely the one that by making it mandatory and default and removing custom ring signature sizes and stuff like ring sizes and stuff like that, we are making this really stupid simple for everyone to use. There's a few hurdles we have to get over in terms of user experience, And those will come. Those will definitely come. Things will get better. But by and large, Monero is much simpler to use in terms of privacy. And most people wouldn't even know that they're being protected. They're just being protected by default. That's cool. That's something I can get behind. I'm all over that. I am all over that. All right, Justin's like, blah, blah, blah. Diego, you're the best. How can you be the best this much? Yeah, so we are running out of time. I did start a little bit late, so I don't think I can go for that much longer because we are still looking at a puzzle that Need Money 90 is going to give us. And I don't know about you guys, but I would like to win. I'm probably too lazy to win, but I would like to win. So we're going to go ahead and get over there at some point. The reality is that cryptocurrencies really need a privacy layer on the base layer, on layer 1, not layer 2. It's not going to be good enough because even if you use layer 2 back and forth all the time, in the end, you are you're settling on a non-fungible transparent chain, and there will be metadata that will be used to associate different things. In fact, something cool like layer 2 Lightning Network actually is better suited for Monero for a lot of reasons, because not only is layer 1 completely fungible and private, but layer 2, which enhances that, is once again going to become more than the sum of its parts in terms of making Monero even better in that way. So a lot of these things that are being touted for Bitcoin in terms of the future of privacy actually would just work better on Monero in terms of how much it enhances the privacy. We are really at the forefront of privacy technologies and finances. It's actually kind of scary because there's nobody to go before us. When we look back, or when other projects, I guess the way to say it is when other projects look forward, they can always say, well, Monero was there taking the brunt. Monero is there. Monero is known as the king of privacy coins, and so everyone's trying to catch up to Monero. But there's a certain comfort that you don't have to pave the way 100%. But because Monero is at the head of the pack, it can be scary because there's nobody that went before us. We are charting there are uncharted territories basically right in front of us, and we are the cartographers trying to figure this out. And that's very, very scary sometimes. It's a high calling, if you will. Not to try to get too much on a high horse about how the Monero community is the next coming of something, but it's scary, it's hard, and we will fail. We will fail. And as a community, I've been very proud of kind of the open mind that we have, and skepticism Sundays, or hearing people out and understanding their misgivings or their concerns with Monero, whether it's on a social level or whether it's on a technological level. But it's actually really cool to be a part of this project. And if you're kind of watching casually, whether after the fact or you're here live right now, and you're thinking, yeah, you know what, this does sound kind of cool, I kind of want to get involved. Let me tell you, man, like Monero is one of the projects to be at. We do a lot of fun stuff. We got a great community. We're really at the forefront of a lot of technologies. We're really pushing the bar, and it shows. Monero is very respected across this cryptocurrency community. So, except by a few, there are a few who don't, but we love them anyway. We love them enough to just kick them in the shins. So I'm pretty much done. I don't think I have anything else unless there's any questions that somebody has for me. Let me look at the chat. Revoir doesn't use subaddresses. How come? So for those of you who don't know, I make the Monero Revoir, or the Revoir Monero Weekly. If you go to revoir-monero.com, you can see it. It's just a weekly newsletter about all the biggest news, the bigger news things. There's price movements in there for those of you who care about those kinds of things, and CCS stuff. What do you mean we don't use subaddresses? You mean the donation address at the bottom? That's the general fund donation address, man. Like, I don't get money from that. If you send to that donation address, it goes to the general fund. It doesn't go to me. I can ask them to generate a subaddress for that if you want me to, and it'll go to them. I mean, yeah. So, yeah. Wasn't Monerujo developed by a member of the core team? No, actually. Monerujo was developed because a guy, M2049er, he's like, oh, there's no Android wallet. I'm going to make it myself. And he did. And I help out the Monero core team, not the Monero core team, the Monero team a lot. I found after he had made kind of the basics of the project, I said, hey, I know a couple of designers around here. Do you want me to hook you up with them? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so then the Monero team was born. And so it is very much separate from both the core team and the Monero project. It's its own little thing. So if you want to donate to them and love on them and work with them, by all means, please do. They are awesome people. And they have made a lot of cool things that have been, once again, setting the bar from even Monero, like in terms of connecting to remote nodes and stuff. So the answer is no. And okay, wow, is there still that many people here just chilling, just listening?
Yeah, you have a following, Diego.
Oh, yeah. All right, then. I'm going to pass it off to Justin. Be on the lookout for these little plushy gunters coming to Cypher Market, coming sometime near you.
It's already there.
It is already there.
Anyway, yeah, thank you, Diego, for walking us through that. I think, like, from a personal perspective, I think it's very odd that you had people that were the forefront of, you know, personal autonomy that are currently and in the past arguing for Bitcoin. They're arguing that, you know, Bitcoin is what gives people their power back, whatever it might be. And I mean, that's all fine and good, but I just don't understand how they can look at a completely transparent system and say, you know what, I think privacy is something that's like well down in that list. I'm going to say, you know, maybe you can mine your own blocks to have privacy. Just mine your own blocks and then you'll figure it out. And I just think it's ridiculous that, I mean, that the same proponents that speak so strongly of, you know, the fundamental values of Bitcoin will just so immediately discard privacy. I think that I think that across the board in the cryptocurrency community, people need to take privacy far more seriously. And I think even if they're not out there supporting Monero, Zcash, or whatever it might be, they need to be at the forefront of demanding that, you know, Bitcoin, Litecoin, etc., add sensible privacy features to their base protocol, or else we're just going to essentially be building these surveillance systems. And I just don't understand how they can just so strongly support a system that ultimately will undermine the individuals that use it. I mean, I just think that's kind of crazy. Are there any final comments? Otherwise, I really appreciate you taking on the task of speaking about this difficult, complicated topic. Diego, I think that what we're going to do now, Need Money 90 has been waiting very patiently. I'm going to have just less than 5 minutes of your time. I have a few announcements that I would like to make in regards to fun things that have been happening in the Monero ecosystem within you know today and within the past week. So first, I would like to point out that Mastering Monero recently, as in earlier today, released their free PDF version. So they previously had a print edition that I helped publish, but now there is a free PDF available, and there are ebooks available on Google Play and Amazon for you to purchase and use. This is a fantastic resource. Again, if you'd like to purchase it and support the material, you're totally welcome to. Otherwise, feel free to just download it, download the PDF. It doesn't cost you anything to read. It's a great method for you to learn more about Monero. If you need to start somewhere, that's a great place, whether or not you're a very beginner or you're even a developer that wants to learn more about Monero. So certainly a good place to start there. The second thing is I'd like to announce that Monero now has its own specific DEF CON village. So last year, Monero split DEF CON with another blockchain-related group. Now Monero has its complete own room that's even bigger. So planning is going on with that. Check out the Monero Meta repo. Check out the issues there for upcoming events. There is a meeting this Saturday, if you can make it, if you are interested in coming to DEF CON and participating in those experiences. We need the entire community to come together to plan, you know, the weekend of talks, the weekend of festivities, the weekend of educational materials that we can give out to people. Third, Sir Ray Nother, who again couldn't make it this evening, but yeah, he's very active in the Monero Research Lab community. He's one of the full-time members. Spent a lot of effort in preparing the Monero Conferenco. The Monero Conferenco is an entire conference devoted to Monero. So this year, in addition to having our entire own village at DEF CON for Monero, we also have an entire conference coming up in June in Denver, Colorado. I posted the schedule in the chat. It is a fantastic lineup. Brandon could not have done any better at getting people to come together. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I think they'll all be recorded. We're all really excited. Binary Fate announces Minko release. That was earlier in this chat. And then Diego recently started documenting the week's most important events with the Moneroversary, which used to be a quarterly report that ran for like 2 issues, but now it's a weekly report that you can use. So I just wanted to make sure that people who are maybe not hitting F5 in the Monero subreddit like I am all the time might be knowledgeable about this new resource that people can use to stay updated. So
I am now the gatekeeper of the news of Monero.
Yes, Diego now gets to determine what is important and what isn't. So
I accept bribes.
Yeah, you can bribe them. I hear you can bribe them to make your way onto the merchant of the week. Just saying. I mean, Cypher Market's been on there. He probably just bribing himself. Anyway, all those announcements are to the side. We have a lot of really cool things. And in the chat, no, we do not have free Samsung Galaxy players that are issues. Those are super old. Those are like iPod Touch old. So yeah, old personal history related to my stupid username. Anyway, so now I'm going to hand it over to Need Money, who's going to get us started with a fun puzzle for you all. After the puzzle, we even have a game. So we're going to start with this really fun puzzle activity, move into a game. And I think during this time, the Riat group can start actually finally cutting the Monero cake, because I'm sure they want to go to bed at some point, because we've kind of kept them on the line for a while. But again, thank you, Diego. Take it off, Need Money. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. So Justin, do you want to get the crossword displayed on your screen so that we can show that in a second?
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second here. I'll pull it up.
While I talk about it. Okay, so over the past couple of days, I have made a multi-step puzzle, and at the end of it, there is a game theory game that you will be entered to participate in. I will not go into any more details, but you will have a chance to actually win some Monero. Have fun. We will be showing the crossword right here and reading off the clues one by one, and then I will release the puzzle to both the YouTube chat and the subreddit. And it's off to the races. There's no rush as long as you complete it within the time limit, which is 24 hours from when the puzzle gets posted on Reddit. Then your entry is just as good as anybody who submitted it before you. So yeah, enjoy.
Although Need Money will respect you more if you do it earlier. So there's always that to keep in mind. All right. So
there's less question that you stole your answer from somebody else.
Yes, if you're the very first person to submit it, there's a lower chance that you stole your answer. All right. So Need Money. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to speak for this to remain up. It only appears present to the listeners when this is up. So do you want me just to start reading these acrosses and downs for people?
You weren't supposed to show all of the questions. Okay. I mean, I guess it just I guess it just reveals.
What do you want me to do?
That's fine. That's fine.
Do you want me to just actually, you know what? I can here, stop sharing for a second. Let me just resize this a bit. We can zoom in.
Everything is ruined.
This is fairly impromptu.
No one saw that.
All things in Monero.
No one. Okay. Yeah. No one saw that. You did not see that. It will. You're just going to have this magical one that shows up in a second. I wasn't. Yeah. It'll show up in just 1 second here. We have this puzzle. Do you want to share the puzzle with people first? No. We probably want to. Anyway. Do you want me just to go down the list reading the across and downs?
Yeah, read the across and downs and just show the
okay.
Puzzle.
We're gonna share this. Okay. Puzzle time. So is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Just
perfect.
Okay, perfect. So I've zoomed in, I've cropped out all the bottom parts. So I decided that it would be really fun for me to read these off individually for the sake of adding extra suspense. So you can thank me for that. So we're going to work on solving this Moneroversary puzzle together. Need Money takes all credit for putting this together. So get ready to start marking down your answers. Hopefully you can see the numbers there. Otherwise, this probably will be distributed after, I imagine. But it would be really fun to get a head start on this. So first, without further ado, let's start with number 2 across. Okay, and let me zoom in a little bit more. Let's even crop the title out of there. Let's get this as big as possible. Okay, so 2 across. The R in MRL stands for Monero blank lab. Okay, getting everyone started on a nice softball here.
It's a tough one.
Yeah,
I don't expect anybody to get it right away. Just think about it for a while.
We've actually allotted 1 hour for people to guess the proper answer there. Okay. number 3 across. Monero's progenitor. Apparently, this is also learn new words with Need Money 90. He gets to flex on how many fancy words he knows. Monero.
What other word would you use for that?
I don't know. There's a lot of different words.
What's parent?
So 3 across, Monero's progenitor. Okay, 5 across, the database used by Monero Core. What is the database used by Monero Core? And number 7 across.
MongoDB or something.
What were you saying?
No, it's like MongoDB or something.
Oh, yeah. 7 across. CCS is the Monero community blank system. Let's see if Binary Fate can get this one right. I know he's he's just shrugging in the back. So the CCS is the Monero community blank system. 8 across. Every Sunday, the Monero subreddit has a scheduled blank Sunday thread. So again, 8 across, every Sunday, our Monero, the Monero subreddit, has a scheduled blank Sunday thread. 10 across. This is the favored wine of Monero IRC. And in parentheses, it says a 4-digit year followed by type, no spaces. Okay, again, 10 across is the favored wine of Monero IRC. And it's a 4-digit year followed by type, no spaces. 11 across. This is the last name of the scientist the MRL adopts usernames from. If you're paying attention, we gave some of these answers earlier, so this is an incentive to watch the whole video.
Yeah, most of these answers have been answered here. A couple of them.
Yeah. So again, 11 across, the last name of the scientist the MRL adopts usernames from. 12 across. This is in the lower left-hand corner in case you have trouble seeing it. It says boron butterfly V11 activation height. So what was the boron butterfly version 11 activation height? Again, that's 12 across. Okay. So now we've done all the 12 across. We've done all the acrosses. I recommend if you're looking things up, you put that on hold for a second. You just remember what to look up. And we're going to start with the downs so you don't accidentally miss something. Okay. Number 1 down, obviously the most important one. The first name of Monero's lead maintainer. What is the first name of Monero's lead maintainer? Number 2 down. The name of the anticipated new ASIC-resistant proof of work algorithm. So number 2 down is the name of the anticipated new ASIC-resistant proof of work algorithm. Number 3 down, the first name of the researcher who invented bulletproofs. Again, 3 down. The first name of the researcher who invented bulletproofs. Number 4 down. The contributor with the highest number of GitHub commits / lines of code. So again, number 4 down. Who is the contributor with the highest number of GitHub commits / lines of code? Number 6 down. What is the name of Monero's new range proofs? Again, 6 down. What is the name of Monero's new range proofs? Number 9 down, the last one. What are the first 7 hexadecimal digits of the first Monero block? 7 down. Sorry, 9 down. I apologize. What are the first 7 hexadecimal digits of the first Monero block? Okay, so we'll distribute a pamphlet that has all these details. We just wanted to be really dramatic about it. But the password to the encrypted archive.
Submitted the archive and the crossword puzzle in its entirety to the r/Monero subreddit.
Okay, so can I stop sharing my screen?
Yep, you could stop sharing your screen. Anybody can go and pull that up if you'd like, fill it out, and complete the next couple steps. Because there's more than a crossword. The crossword's the easy part.
Yep, the crossword gets you access to 2 extra steps. And now we're going to sit and wait until Binary Faith finishes it. Just kidding. In fact, I'm just going to pull up the rest of my information. I unfortunately wasn't paying attention to chat, so hopefully it didn't totally blow up here. Okay, sorry, reading up, just catching up. Okay, some people were remarking about how they only memorized a few. But yeah, thank you, Need Money 90, for preparing this really fun puzzle for everyone to complete. So, is there anything else that you want to mention in relation to this puzzle?
No, that's about it.
Okay, when is the deadline for this puzzle?
The deadline is 24 hours from now, so that will be like 5:15 PST tomorrow. So around 0 Universal.
Yep. Thank you so much for both offering the puzzle and, of course, offering a prize for people to.
And Medusa has offered to contribute to the prize pool as well, so it'll be slightly larger than if I was just running it on my own.
Oh.
So thank you, Medusa.
Excellent. So that's really fun. Now, in addition to this puzzle, I prepared one more really fun activity for us to do. It's similar to the activity that Diego gave at the closing DEF CON speech. So I hope that Diego will be really excited here. I learned from the best. We really just play off of each other pretty well. So we're going to play a little game where I'm going to give you 10 questions and you need to guess the correct answer to them. And to help facilitate with this tool, we're going to use something that my mom uses for her elementary school classes pretty frequently. It's something called Kahoot. So it's really easy to sign up and join. I'm going to give you a link. You just click on it in your, on your phone or on your browser. You type in a code, you get added to the game, and then I'll show questions and I'll share my screen again. I'll share the questions as they come in. You need to answer the correct answer, and you get points for answering correctly. You lose your winning streak where you get bonus points if you answer incorrectly. So we're going to have a nice little fun game. Core team members can participate, but they aren't entitled to any bragging rights because they should know all the answers already, but they're welcome to. So I'm going to start sharing that information with you all. And I hope that this will be a nice little fun activity for us to do. So first, I'm almost there, Let's play this game. And again, I'm going to share a link with you all. I'm almost there. Podium, cool. Sweet, game pen. Classic, player versus player. Okay, it's almost ready. So you need to go to this website. It will prompt you for a code. And you need to type in the PIN 766690. So I'm going to post this. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And sorry, I need to mute this tab. It's just making some annoying noises. Okay. Share my screen again. Share. Okay, full screen. Here we go. Kahoot. Okay, so you need to go to this website. We have Monero entering. We have rehrar entering. I wonder who that is. So again, it's just really easy to use. We'll make sure we get a few other people to enter. And these shouldn't be too hard questions. Some of them are purposely a little tricky, but I think everyone would have a lot of fun doing this. So we'll give it maybe another minute or so before we start. Hopefully we can get more than 4 players in. We have, more than 4 people watching right now. So let's get, at least 25 of these people in. Ideally. Okay, we got some cool people in here. We see moldy rats. I know who that is, but I'm not going to mention it, in front of everyone here. It just means someone I know isn't spending their time studying on a Thursday night. All right. Anyone else who would like to join? We're at 6 players. Okay, so you can go to kahoot.it.
Yeah,
and then it should literally just prompt you for the 6-digit code, which you type in. And then it should work. You should not need any special browser or app or anything. Okay, we're getting more people, 9 people. We got some heavyweights in here though. Okay, sweet. Okay, I'm glad it's working for people. This is good news. It's not a complete crash and burn, so that's nice so far at least. We still have some time to go before it will be. Don't you all feel like you're in elementary school again? Okay, I'll give it another 30 seconds here, and then we'll get started. It's supposed to be a nice, fun game. Again, you get points for answering things correctly. If you answer multiple things correct in a row, you'll get additional points. Furthermore, you get extra points for answering quickly. So if you know the answer, you should answer as quickly as possible because you'll get more points if you answer right away than if you'll wait till the very end. So just keep that in mind. There's certainly an element here where you're encouraged to answer as quickly as you can, assuming you know the right answer. All right, just another 10 seconds here. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm gonna get started. There's 11 of you. Enjoy. Here we go. Let's see how smart the Monero community is. Okay. I set this to low latency mode on purpose. So what was Monero's original name? And now you need to select the correct answer. You should have only 4 options.
It's just a bunch of shapes.
Yep, you need to look on the screen to see what they correlate to. Ten seconds.
We need you to talk because it's not big on the screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so this one. So I'll name the other one next time. Okay, so most of you got the Monero's original name was Bit Monero. The other options were Monero Original, which 2 people said. There was Bitcoin, which no one said, luckily. And there's Monero Coin, which 1 person stated. So if you got it wrong, and especially if you couldn't read it, I apologize. I'll read the next one out loud more. But the correct answer is Bit Monero, as Ricardo fluffypony stated when he was speaking. Monero was originally called Bit Monero for the first week or so when it was shortened to simply Monero, which they felt was a much better name. So let's click next and see what the leaderboard is. Okay, so you can see here that there is a difference based off who voted or who answered first. So we have in first place Kimura, followed by C, and then Xe, then Binary Fate, then Need Money 90. So in addition, you can't just get it right to win. You also need to answer quickly. So be ready. Yeah. Diego probably thinks the game's rigged because it's not straight on here. And keep in mind, while the voting is occurring, if you're in the chat, don't speak because it will make it so that no one else can see what the answers are. All right, so
It's called
next.
strategy, Justin.
Yeah, no cheating, Need Money 90. Okay. Here we go. Next question. Who is the founder of Monero? Is it Thankful for Today? Is it Ricardo Fluffypony Spagni? Is it David Latipi? Or is it the Zcash Foundation? You have another 20 seconds. Ooh, 10 people in so far, 11 people in. Okay, so the correct answer is thankful for today. I think most of us are thankful for today because it is Monero's birthday, of course. 9 of you got it right. 2 of you said David Latapy. So David Latapy is the late member of the Monero core team. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago in Monero's early history, but he was one of the original advocates who were going out speaking in conferences and so forth about Monero's technology. So he was critically important to the origin of Monero. I believe, Diego, you can correct me if I'm wrong, David Latapy is one of the people who advocated strongly for, was it both 0MQ and also the Monero contributor conduct where they merge things very aggressively as long as it doesn't conflict with other parts of the code. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay, Binary Fate, do you remember? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. So thankful for David Latapy, can you speak very briefly about their contributions? Okay, that's a question mark. Okay. So he was a previous Monero core team member. We can keep proceeding. Let's see the standings. I know you're all waiting for those. Okay, still in first place by a margin of just over 20 points is Kimura. Then Binary Fate swept his way up to second place there. Rehrar got on the leaderboards. He is on number 5 right now. And we still have Sia and Need Money 90 doing pretty well too. So a lot of fun stuff going on here. Let's have our next question. When did Monero have a rich list? Number 1, before ring signatures were mandatory. 2, before stealth addresses were mandatory. 3, before ring CT. Or 4, Monero has never had a rich list. And there's about 15 seconds left. Keep in mind there's about a 3 to 5 second delay on this, unfortunately. Okay, all except one of you gave the correct answer that Monero has never had a rich list. One of you said that before stealth addresses were mandatory. Stealth addresses have always been mandatory for Monero. So as a result, there never would have been a way for you to send a transaction with revealing what your actual address is. So pretty interesting here. A lot of you got it right. Let's see what the new standings are. Binary Fate, boom, answering quickly, making his way up the leaderboard. Then Need Money 90, then Kimura, C, and Rehrar. Wonder if any of them will be displaced here. Let's see what happens next. When did the Monero Community Workgroup host its first coffee chat? January 2016, January 2017, October 2017, or January 2018? 20 seconds left. Got most of the answers in. Let's see if people remember this one.
I guess this one.
Okay, it clearly showed this might have some change up in the scores.
Nope.
There's certainly a split distribution here. The first Monero Coffee Chat was actually in October 2017. It was not in January. We started in a weird month, but it was the point where Diego and I were like, you know what? We need to have more people talking to each other where they can, real-time interact and answer questions and so forth. And we decided that would happen around October. So that was when we had the first one. Did you need to say something, Diego?
I've been to so many of those accursed things.
Yeah, there's a lot of these things. I'd like to point out that a lot of things went wrong in the first one. We tried to live stream it, and then that didn't work to YouTube. So everyone just joined a Jitsi link instead, and then we later I literally screen captured it with OBS and then later uploaded it to YouTube. So if you want to watch a really bad episode of the Coffee Chat, at least in terms of production quality is concerned, watch the October 2017 one. We've only gotten slightly better since. All right, let's see if this changed the leaderboards at all. Ooh, he's on fire. Rehrar with 3630 points. Then there's Binary Fate, Need Money 90, Kabura, and making their way on their leaderboard for the first time is Monero. So Rehrar, you've gotten 4 correct in a row. You are perfect so far. Let's see if you can keep that up. All right. Next question. What was the name of Monero's first proof-of-work mining algorithm? Number 1, SHA-256, 2, Crypto Night, 3, Crypto Note, or 4, Cuckoo Cycle? 15 seconds. Most people have answered here. 2, 1. All right. A lot of people got that one wrong there. This is the Monero's first mining algorithm. So many people, at least most people said Crypto Note. Crypto Note is the protocol that Monero is based off of, but the proof of work algorithm was called Crypto Night. So keep that in mind. Even though there's similar names, Crypto Note generally refers to, Monero's ring signatures, et cetera, but Crypto Night is the best answer there because that's the name of the specific proof of work mining algorithm. So let's see what happened in the standings here. Rehrar, still 4,900 points, and it looks like it hasn't really changed that much since last time. We still have Rehrar, Binary Fate, Need Money 90, Kimura, and Monero on that leaderboard. But Rehrar is just destroying everybody. Let's see if he's going to get the next one wrong. I'm going to run over. I'm going to take a flight to wherever Diego lives, and I'm going to click the wrong answer on purpose.
Justin shared all the questions with me before this.
I can assure you I didn't, but it would apparently seem that way. All right. What's the next question? Which is not the name of a current or previous written publication that shared weekly news? Monero Hard Fork, Revro Monero, Monero Monitor, or the Monero Moon? Which is it? Okay, we have about another 10 seconds left. Okay, most
anybody has finished the crossword puzzle.
Yeah, we can check on that. This is only 10 questions long. We're mostly through it now. So I'd love to know if people have completed the crossword puzzle for sure. Most people got the correct answer there. The Monero Hard Fork. Diego was working on the raw Monero, which we mentioned immediately before this. There's also Monero Monitor, which was out for some period of time, for a few weeks. That's actually the earliest of any of these publications. And then it was unfortunately canceled, as was Monero Moon, which is more recent, but it also was canceled due to the person who writing it having limited access to time. But it was a Monero form funding system proposal that actually helped support it over the time. Now we just pawn everything off onto Diego. Okay, so standings haven't really changed there, I think. And maybe some change between C and Kimura. Let's see what happens in the next round here.
And I passed Binary Fate, but that's not important.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Good job, Need Money 90. Good job. All right. Which of the following has never been a Monero minimum ring size? 1, 2, 3, or 5?
Oh, shoot. I think I missed.
I feel like this is one of those you know it or you don't type questions.
Yeah, no, I messed up.
Yeah.
That think was not a think. I clicked way too quick and then realized immediately afterwards what I'd done.
So this has... Okay, we might have some upset people as a result of the answers to this one. So I argue that Monero has never had a minimum ring size of 2, okay? Most people said 1. I would say that in Monero. What were you saying?
We called them mix-ins back then, didn't we?
Yeah, we called it the mix-ins back then. So to those, mix-in is the equivalent of ring size minus 1. So a ring size of 1 would be a 0 mix-in transaction. So there certainly were those in Monero's old history, and it had some previous privacy consequences that Monero needed to grow for. The original Monero Research Lab papers, MRL1 and MRL4, advocated for ring sizes to be set to 3 as a minimum and then eventually 5 as a minimum. 2 was not recommended as a minimum because it does not provide good protection against chain reaction attacks. Basically, if one member of the rings was compromised, then the other ring member would then therefore become another zero mix-in transaction effectively. And as a result, it would just cascade. So you need at least a minimum ring size of 3 to prevent these sort of cascading chain reactions. So MRL recommended 3 and 5. Monero moved to those as minimum ring sizes, but 2 was never a Monero minimum ring size according to consensus. So this is going to change things up a bit, I imagine. Diego's the expert here. I think
you guys are a bunch of scrubs, I'll be honest.
Diego's killing it. Need Money 90 is still in front of Binary Fate. I think nothing else changed because Diego seemingly is the only person that got this one right. So very, very interesting. I did not expect this one to be so divisive, but very interesting to know for future quizzes I put together. Yeah, sorry, Need Money. All right, next question. 8 of 10. With the 0.14.1 update, approximately what proportion of a Monero transaction can be pruned? Is it 2/3, 1/3, 1/10, or 7/8? This is for a specific transaction. What proportion can be pruned with the upcoming 0.14.1 upgrade? This is one of the trickiest ones, I think, of this quiz.
It depends on whether it means striping or not. I can't remember whether that's in yet.
Okay, most people got this one correct, which I'm a little surprised. I thought this would be the hardest one, not the previous one. But yes, for a specific Monero transaction, about 2/3 of the data is removed for those that are pruned in some sense with the 0.14.1 update. But that means 1/3 of the data is removed. Sorry, 1/3 of the data remains approximately. That's the second answer. And then the 7/8 number is of the transactions that are, that you have and would like to prune. That is a proportion that are pruned. So essentially 7/8 of the transactions are pruned by 2/3 is the best way to look at that. So looks like most people still were able to see through that one, which is really good. Of course, Diego still saw through it. Is there a change in leaderboard? So Binary Fate is 40 points ahead of Need Money 90. So we're getting close, tied for second and third. And I think there's still a chance in the last few questions for C, Monero, and others to keep making their way up. Yes, Professor L, Kahoot, we're trying it out. We're seeing how this will happen. We can get some feedback after this if it was a good program to use or not. All right, 9 of 10. How frequently are the Monero community workgroup meetings held? Once per quarter, once per month, every other week, or every week? Okay, most people have answered. About 10 seconds remain here. Diego, get one wrong just for fun. All right. Most people chose the correct answer of every other week. The Monero community workgroup meets every other week as far as a meeting is concerned. We also have coffee chats once per month, which means that sometimes it feels like we're meeting every week, or maybe it feels like we're not meeting enough. Depends on your perspective.
Oh man, let's meet once a quarter instead.
I'm sure there are people that despite not voting for once a quarter, would like to meet once a quarter. So there's always that. So very interesting. Most people chose the correct answer there. Diego, of course, did. Binary Fate is still on top of Need Money. I think he actually has a little bit of a gain there, so he must have answered a little bit more quickly. And Monero and C are still battling, battling towards the bottom of the short ledger leaderboard there. Okay, last question, I believe, if I can count properly. Is everyone ready for the very last question about who's the best Monero person? Just kidding. But
obviously SGP.
yeah, I would have gotten all these right. All right, last question. Which of the following Monero wallets shares its view key with a specified server? Is it 1, Moneruyo, 2, Cake Wallet, 3, X Wallet, or 4, MyMonero? Last question. Okay, everyone answered in time. So the correct answer is MyMonero. Most people got that one correct. Moneruyo, Cake Wallet, and X Wallet, at least currently, all use a remote node system, but they do not share the view key with the server. The view key is something you can optionally share with some services. It allows them to provide services to you in a more efficient way, but you certainly sacrifice some of your privacy in doing so, at least if you're trusting someone else to review that information for you. All right, let's see the final leaderboard here. Okay, Diego, you destroyed it. Okay, you got 10 out of 10 there. Okay. I need to make the next ones harder because he has 11,845 points. Need Money 90 was able to beat out Binary Fate at the very end there with 8 out of 10 correct with 7,807 points. And then Binary Fate doing well as always with 7 out of 10 correct, 6,701 points. So hopefully that was enjoyable for everyone. These are the overall leaderboards, I guess top 5. Thank you everyone for played. I hope this was enjoyable. I guess we can spend the next few minutes debating if this was actually enjoyable for everyone. Please leave a comment in chat if this was fun for you, especially if you participated, or if you thought this was really dumb. In any case, if you think it was dumb, luckily you can still work on the puzzle that Need Money 90 spent a lot of time preparing for you. So I hope that you really enjoy that. Are there any last closing things that we think we need to talk about in relation to this really happy Monero birthday? You know what? Actually, the cake in Riat still has not been cut. How has that not been cut yet? I think we need to cut it before we go.
Yeah, it makes me hungry. I am actually quite hungry.
Yeah, I haven't had dinner yet. I'm starving. It's almost 8 p.m. here, my time.
Alex, how's it going, Alex?
It's cake time here.
Yeah.
Yes, Nathan, it is better than iClickers.
Yeah. We're gonna light the Monero.
Candles.
Cake.
Start länger.
It takes a moment for a second.
Later.
Yay!
Oh no.
The XMR is doing his best.
Happy Easter, Monero.
Why isn't it
Do
burning?
we have the camera on?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, happy Moneroversary, everyone.
Yay!
Happy birthday, Manero!
Gosh, we're such dorks.
Okay. I think you should cut it there, Justin.
Binary Fate, did you crack the puzzle yet?
Yeah, Alex gonna cut the cake, right? Hold on a sec. So.
Oh dang it! You guys aren't gonna eat this in front of me, are you?
Ja.
Ich habe mich gespannt, ich habe die Sachen dort jetzt die ganzen Ohrstopfeln.
Oh gosh.
Das ist von mir Rezepte dahin.
Thank you so much.
Those cake slices don't look very fungible.
Matthias,
Cutting machine.
Matthias, this is for you.
I don't see why we have to watch them eat cake. This isn't fun. I want to cake and I can't have any.
Viennese people do cutting. Es gibt nie genug Torte.
It's all about the cake.
It's so bad. I can't keep up.
That's so funny. All right, you got the idea. Hey.
There you go.
Justin,
Hard forks.
you wish you
Hard
were here.
forks.
You wish you were here. Honestly, this is the best cake ever.
I'll have to go get a cake sometime for sure. Make sure we have some at DEF CON or something.
Yeah.
We bring it.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Thank
for
you so
the
much for hosting tonight. Yeah, it was
organization
awesome.
and everything. That was great. Thanks, Diego, and whoever is left. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
It was great. Thank you.
Yep. I'm gonna head out and grab some food. Thanks everybody for being here. Happy Easter to Monero, all that kind of stuff. You know, you guys are the best. Blah blah blah. Love you. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope it was really enjoyable. Again, check out the puzzle that Need Money 90 prepared for you. Enjoy the rest of your time in Vienna, everybody.
Just by the way, if you finish the puzzle, you're entered for a chance to win some Monero. Like you can actually win some money. So don't discount it. This isn't just for fun.
It's fun and money.
We take it seriously anyway. Rest assured, we take it very seriously.
All right. Enjoy your cake, everyone. And we'll see you at the next coffee chat. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
See you.